waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants, and as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, you know, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Friday. I'll be here right through until 1 o'clock. So much to discuss, and I want your views on it. First is our top story today about the Muslim Islamist killer, a killer of 2 people who has been in prison for some time. And back in 2004, he's had this long-running legal battle to get money from the government. You, the taxpayer, are giving him £7.5 grand into his hand, and the legal battle itself has cost more than £250,000, or around £250,000, which we're paying for too. Why? Why was he got this money? Well, he says he was left depressed after he was left in isolation when there are people who wanted to kill him or make his life difficult. Certainly, well, perhaps he should have thought of that before he killed 2 people. Really, this is where we are in Britain in 2026. The one-in, one-out migrant deal returns, with France is branded a joke now, as figures show we have taken, guess what, more people than we have sent back. Honestly, you couldn't write this stuff. You couldn't make this stuff up. You couldn't create this stuff in a lab. Similarly, the new mayor of New York, Zoran Mandami, big questions about whether his thoughts towards the Jewish community there are as they should be. Lots to talk about there. Also, Farage promising to restore law and order in London. Lots of people very worried about that, not just here in the capital, but right throughout the country. And one thing we never lose sight of on this station is that 82% of our viewers and listeners live outside London. We are not a London station. We are not a London-centric station, but we'll talk about that in relation to the whole of the country. We'll also talk about Starmer's Troubles Aid, the person he has put in charge of being his advisor on legacy, this idea of whether we prosecute soldiers from Northern Ireland and people who've taken part in other conflicts as well. Veterans are treated worse than terrorists. That's what the guy Starmer has appointed is saying. Also, do you feel better or worse off? Because apparently by 2030, if you're a middle earner, earner, you're going to be £500 a year worse off. But if you're a pensioner or you're on benefits, a welfare claimant, you're going to be better off and feel better off. There are lots and lots of people worrying about the fairness of all of that. So let me know your thoughts on that. Also, the National Trust blacklisting a volunteer who pointed out spelling mistakes. Yes, really. Stay with us here on Talk. There's so much to talk about. I want to make sure that your voice gets on the air between now and 1 o'clock. And the number is 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note, less than a minute, please, if you would. 0344 499 1000. That is the number as well for WhatsApp text messages. Those are coming in already. You can also give me a ring. Get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Mick's been in touch already from Wallington saying, I'm 75 years old. I'm normally at this time of the year looking out of my window. I can see Christmas lights and hear happy people coming home from parties. And the pub, this year Starmer's Britain has been miserable, dark and gloomy. I've seen no rejoicing. Very sad. Well, it's a very interesting point. The Christmas lights are too expensive, Mick, because the bills have gone up. Oh no, we're all getting £150 off our bill. No, we're not. As one of our regular viewers, Carol in Liverpool, pointed out very wisely a couple of days ago, the 150 reduction is only for some people. Keir Starmer implying that it's for everybody. It's not. So the lights aren't on, Mick. You say people coming from parties in the pub. Well, who can afford to go to the pub these days? The pubs themselves certainly can't afford it. Their business rates are going up in a few months' time. There's so much that is problematic for them. I spoke to Michael Kill of the Nighttime Industries Association a couple of days ago, and he was talking about rate spills. Just another way pubs are under attack. It now costs about 40% more to actually have to run a pub or to run a club than it does previously when things really before COVID. So there's a lot to discuss in all of that. But the story I want to talk about right now with Brendan O'Neill, who will be with me in a second, is a really, really shocking one. This is an Islamist killer winning a £240,000 battle over, guess what, his human rights. He took a prison officer hostage. He demanded the release of Abu Qatada, that absolute scumbag who wants to destroy our country. He's won a £240,000 battle over taxpayer-funded compensation and legal costs. Guess who has agreed to pay the £7,500? Yep, the mastermind himself, the Justice Secretary David Lammy, has said that £7,500 in compensation will be paid and a £234,000 legal bill will be paid in regard to Fuad Owale, who's a convicted double murderer, and the judge has ruled his treatment in jail breached his human rights. Why did it breach his human rights? Because he was transferred to a special separation unit for the country's most dangerous prisoners after he and another inmate ambushed the prison officer, threatened to kill him unless Britain released Abu Qatada. So he was segregated for threatening to kill the prison officer who he took hostage. Okay, so he was segregated for that. He claimed the segregation designed to prevent him harming officers and radicalising other inmates. Sounds pretty sensible to me. Although, also, mate, you've killed two people. You're a double murderer. You shouldn't have any rights apart from the very, very basic ones. He said it breached his right to a private life under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. He'd suffered severe depression as a result of being denied contact with other inmates. This is where we are. This is where we are. Now, I'm not sure about the absolute wisdom of withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights. I think it's probably a good idea, but at the same time, I don't think it'll fix everything, because there'll be so many judges like this judge who will say, I'm only applying the law. This is the way things are. The High Court ruling in his favour. The judge said the degree of interference with the claimant's private life, which had resulted from his removal from association, had been of some significance and duration. Well, should you actually have a right to any form of private life, actually, when you're a prisoner, when you've killed other two people? What about their human rights? What about the human rights of the prison officer who was taken hostage? It's bizarre. It's utterly, utterly bizarre, and says so much about our society and where we are right now in 2026. Brendan O'Neill is the chief political writer at Spiked Online. Brendan, it's good to talk to you. Happy New Year. Am I going mad here?
It's insane. I mean, sometimes you read a news story and you can't quite believe that it's real, and this is one of those examples. I think it shows So many problems with the current system. Firstly, it definitely raises questions about the European Convention on Human Rights. The fact that a double killer like this, who became a radical Islamist who threatened to kill a prison officer, the fact that he can use the ECHR to make his case for a private life is preposterous. And the vast majority of people in this country know that it's preposterous. You know, the more important point here, I think, is that radical Islamists should not be allowed to associate in prison. That is really, really important. We know from various studies that there are some prisons where Islamists were ganging together and basically taking over and threatening other prisoners to convert.
And also radicalising other prisoners. I mean, I worked in the Ministry of Justice and for 6 months as a special advisor. One of the really, really big issues we dealt with was in Streatham. There was a knifeman in Streatham who'd been radicalised in prison. So often what happens is you go in as what they sometimes call an ODC, an ordinary decent criminal. You go in for something awful like armed robbery and you get radicalised into this Islamism. Also people who aren't necessarily members of the Islamic faith, they're not necessarily Muslims before they go in, but are told convert, or will have something to say about that. And some of these gangs not just radicalise people, but bully them into, with threat of their life, to convert to Islam and then try to convert them and radicalise them that way. It's a massive, massive problem. And many of the gangs, of course, running the prisons as well. I have direct experience of that.
It's a huge problem. It's incredible. And I just have this very firm belief that if you're a radical Islamist in prison, you should not be allowed to associate with other radical Islamists. I agree with you. Prisoners should have rights. They should have the basic rights, the right to food, the right to a night's sleep, and maybe after a period of punishment they should have some rights of association as well, of course, but that should not include the right of people like this double killer to associate with other Islamists who hate this country, who hate everyone who represents this country, which in their case would include prison officers. They should not be allowed to associate and spread their poisonous, toxic ideology inside our prisons. That is fundamental rule that we should uphold. And I think the ECHR, if this doesn't raise questions about it in the minds of politicians, nothing will.
Again, we're just coming back again and again and again to the European Convention on Human Rights. It was just yesterday that the European Court of Human Rights has looked into the case of Shamima Begum. She hates this country. Quite a number of people think that actually maybe she should be brought here and put on trial. There's no guarantee that she would necessarily be convicted, of course, although the evidence is very, very strong. She was an Islamic State bride. There are many others who've been Islamic State brides who've been brought back, of course, to this country and told, bad decision, don't do it again. But she hasn't been brought back, and I think that speaks volumes. Spoke to a documentary maker a couple of days ago who had interviewed her a number of times, but unsurprisingly, the ECHR investigating whether Britain had breached the ECHR by stripping her of her citizenship. I mean, if you cannot strip someone of their citizenship, especially when they have the citizenship of another country, in her case Bangladesh, what is the point of sovereign power? What is the point of nationality? What is the point of government, one might argue, if you have the ECHR who says, well, you can make whatever decision you want, but we'll do something differently. And of course, our human rights lawyers, Lord Hermer, Keir Starmer, the ones who run this country, will say, oh, well, the ECHR says it. We must absolutely do it. We couldn't possibly not obey what the ECHR says. Well, the point of international law is, yeah, you should generally obey it. But we've seen, as has happened in this country and others, David Cameron ignoring it when prisoners were told to get the vote, for example. He just said, look, we're just not doing that. We'll deal with the consequences. And there were no consequences.
This is the real problem with the ECHR and the way it's enacted at the moment. It is a threat to our sovereignty. It's a threat to our right to behave as an independent democratic nation and for our elected politicians to make choices that they think are in the national interest. Because so often all of that is challenged by activist lawyers, activist judges, and criminals who exploit the ECHR to get one over on the government. If there is this extra layer of power that prevents elected politicians from doing what they want to do, if what they want to do is within the realm of basic decency and law as we traditionally understood it, that's a real problem. And if you look at someone like Shamima Begum, for example, my personal view is that she committed treason when she went to join ISIS, when she threw her lot in with the sworn enemies of the United Kingdom and the Western world more broadly, a movement that is so savage, so vicious, it kills apostates, it kills Kurds, it kills homosexuals, it oppresses women. When you sign sign up to a movement like that, as she did, then you have lost your right to claim to be a Briton. And for the ECHR to possibly come in and even undercut an important decision like that, that would be a real travesty.
I'll talk more about a couple of other issues in a minute, but lots of people responding to what you have said, and we will talk about that more in a second. I just want to play a voice note now from Peter.
This compensation is an absolute disgrace. You know, what is he depressed? Well, we're all depressed with what this government's doing with us. Can we have 240 grand as well? What they need to do is stop all the legal aid for these people. Just stop paying legal fees. Or if any of these solicitors offer their legal services, they should be made to pay it themselves. They shouldn't be taking more tax money off people in this jumped up sham of a compensation.
I kind of don't blame the lawyers, actually, Peter and myself, because they're doing a job that they're paid to do. I blame the system. I blame the laws that are there in the first place, and a government that is so inept that I can't change them. And I'm talking about successive governments here. I'm not just talking about Labour, although we'll talk quite a lot about them later on in the programme. Very interesting article in the Times today about how Labour does business and the problems that they have. I wonder if we could talk just a little bit about Nigel Farage, Brendan, because he has said that Reform will go double or quits in local elections with a £5 million spending blitz. Tell us a little bit about that. And this is against the backdrop of the not in any way shocking news that the one in, one out scheme has meant that we have taken more people than we have given to France.
I mean, Nigel Farage could just clean up at the moment because there are so many things going wrong in Keir Starmer's Britain, and prime amongst them is the border crisis. The fact we have these broken, porous borders that people are just crossing almost every day, except when the weather is bad, and then it kind of stops for a little bit. But, you know, the one in, one out scheme is a classic example of things that are going wrong, because we have taken in more people from France than we've sent to France, 2 people more, I think, in total. But even more to the point, I think we've sent back 193 people to France as a part of this scheme. During this government, 64,000 people have crossed our borders. It's like, you know, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's making no impact whatsoever on what
we're told it will discourage them. I wonder if there's anybody there on continental Europe sitting in Calais thinking, do you know what, I might, there's a tiny possibility, there's about a minuscule possibility that I'll be sent back to France. I can always come back if I want to, as we know has happened already. People who were deported to France and then came back anyway. I mean, I just wonder if a single person has been put off by the one in, one out strategy.
Absolutely not. It's inconceivable. You know, these are people who are willing to take pretty severe risks anyway to get to the UK, and they're not going to be put off by this scheme that is clearly just a sham. It's just not working. And, you know, the problem is that we have no serious deterrents to stop this breaking of our borders almost every single day of the year. You know, we put the people up in hotels, we give them bed and board, we feed them, you know, most of them end up staying in the UK anyway. It seems impossible for our government to deport them for some reason. You know, this is instead of a deterrent, we're holding up a welcome sign. Yeah. We're saying, come to Britain, we'll let you in, we'll treat you well, you'll get better treatment than the homeless people in Britain itself will be sleeping in the cold over Christmas. That's what we're saying to them. Yeah. They know that's what we're saying, and that's why they keep coming. That's the truth of it.
Just a quick word before you go, Brendan, about Zoran Mandami. He is now the mayor of New York. Already there are issues and problems about what he has said or indeed not saying about anti-Semitism in the city. I'm sure you've been following that, as I have, Brendan. How worried are you by this major politician in control of one of the world's big cities, most important cities?
I'm really worried, actually. And I think, you know, the fact that, for example, he refused to condemn the slogan "Globalise the Intifada," which our own police here in the UK, in Manchester and London, are now cracking down on because they recognise it's an incitement to violence against Jews. And now we have a mayor of New York City, you know, the second largest home to Jews outside of Israel, who refuses to condemn even phrases like that. It's incredibly worrying, and it demonstrates that through the so-called Palestine issue, a lot of old-fashioned anti-Semitism has come to the surface, and he is not the politician to clamp down on it.
Thank you, Brendan. Brendan O'Neill there, the chief political writer at Spiked Online. Thank you to Jake as well, who's been in touch with WhatsApp messages saying, "Hi Peter, why aren't we talking about what's going on in Iran right now?" Jake, believe me, we absolutely will do that before the end of the programme in a couple of different guises. We're going to get an expert on Iran. We're also going to get the military expert, Simon Simon Diggins. He's going to talk about that. We're not ignoring it. There's some in the media who are ignoring this. There's some who are saying, oh, it's all a bit complicated. We can't get journalists into Iran and da-da-da-da. Well, I'll tell you something else that was quite complicated and you couldn't get journalists in. Gaza. We've had that over and over again. We've had the lies of Hamas terrorists pumped into our homes through people who should know better, including the BBC. We are not going to shy away from the Middle East. We're not going to shy away from Iran. We're going to talk about Iran. We're going to talk about it head on, not just today, but in all of my programmes that we need to. Over the weekend, I'm here between 10 and 1 as well. I'm also here next week for all week for Drive as Jeremy takes over on breakfast. Of course, don't forget about that between 6 and 10, 6 a.m. on Monday morning. Talk is the place to be. Jake correctly says that we should talk about it. You're absolutely right, Jake. I agree with you, and we're going to. There's a revolution against the IRGC. Apparently, they're using live ammunition on their population. You're right, 7 people have been killed by the regime. Why aren't the activists condemning that? Why aren't they protesting about that? It's a really, really, really good flipping question, Jake. And do you know who said absolutely nothing about Iran? Amnesty International. They will do anything, they will say anything, they will have any sort of opinion on Gaza. They'll condemn Israel, they'll say Israel are dreadful, they'll say whatever they want to say about the Middle East, specifically Israel and the Palestinian territories issue. What have they said? Have they condemned the Iranian regime using, as you correctly put it, Jake, live ammunition on their own people? No, they have not. I think they've revealed themselves and all of that, as have so many other of these apparently pro-Palestinian activists who are so much on the side of justice and truth. Well, come out against Iran. Come and say that those people should be free, that those people should have the same rights as we do in this democracy. A programme like this would not be broadcast in Iran. There is a horrendous oppression of the people there. Jake, you're absolutely right. We're going to talk about it later in the programme. And if you have any further comments, I'm going to ask the top team behind the glass to look out for Jake's messages. And if you want to comment on it after we talk about it, Jake, I will ask them to make sure that I read them out and they're put on my screen. Stay with us here on Talk. We're going to talk about policing in London in a second. And just a little matter for Sadiq Khan, Sir Sadiq Khan, of course, Knight of the Realm. They can't afford to police Primrose Hill, where people in London wanted to watch fireworks, but they can afford to police a pro-Palestinian protest. Yeah, funny that. Stay with us here on Talk.
I have confidence in the Conservatives, and I have confidence in the energy and combativeness of Kemi.
But the public don't seem to be. The public don't seem to agree with you.
Let's see.
Now, Royal soap opera meets the Epstein files.
Prince Andrew's ties to Epstein already represent one of the monarchy's greatest reputational meltdowns.
This 10-page birthday letter you wrote to Jeffrey Epstein makes a pretty cringeworthy reading.
I find them very embarrassing to see.
First convicted, first indicted, you continued a business and personal friendship.
It was not a business.
Not a business relationship.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Damon in Wigan has been in touch. Hi Damon, I'm strongly against this digital ID scheme, he says, because I have a passport and a national insurance number. I also carry my Armed Forces Veterans card with me at all times. So how much more identification do you need? I think my own view is that this is just another way of controlling the British public, because I can guarantee that illegal migrants and burqa wearers won't have these cards, and the black market will continue to carry on without them, or create the digital IDs themselves through the black market perhaps, Damon. Just another authority plan to bring into force. Thank you for reading this out, Damon. Thank you for that. Thanks for your service to this country as well. I agree with you. I don't know what digital ID is actually going to achieve. I don't know how it's going to make things different. And if you're taking on new work, I'm doing a bit of new work this year. Actually, I'm going to be doing a bit of lecturing at a university, see if I can get some sense into the next generation of journalists. I mean, to take that little posting, which is just a short thing, I've got to bring my passport. Well, if you've got to bring your passport to show yourself that you have the right to work in a country, well, then you should do that. And I think that's fine. I don't think you need digital ID necessarily to have that. Some people, of course, don't have passports and driving licenses, but there are other forms of ID you can get for free. So I think it's a really good point. What do you think of that, and what do you think of all the issues we're talking about this morning? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Take as many calls as I can between now and 1 o'clock. I want to talk about Nigel Farage now. He has pledged Reform will go double or quits on local elections, a £5 million spending blitz. Reform UK got the largest donation of any political party ever in the UK, £9 million recently. He says London is going to be a huge focus for him. Of course, there are going to be many, many other areas that he's going to focus on as well, but the 32 borough councils are up for election on the 7th of May. We'll see in Scotland as well. Reform UK could, in theory, become the opposition there. In Wales, maybe they could become the government in Wales, maybe in a minority administration. It'll be fascinating to see. But on crime in particular, so many people coming into London, maybe they're even only coming in, or indeed not coming in because they're fearful of coming into London for all sorts of different reasons. They contact me all the time, people who commute in or maybe say, oh, I'll go for a day out, and then say, well, actually I won't, I'll go somewhere else because London can be dangerous. Nigel Farage has said, in London, crime is the dominant issue. If you go to the outer donut, 80% of the police stations, the outer boroughs of London, 80% of police stations have closed since 2010, and there's a sense that police are invisible in every way. He's talking about phone thefts, he's talking about the Independent Victims Commissioner finding that just 40% of crime is actually reported in the capital. And if that's the case in the capital, what's it going to be like everywhere else? We're not a London-centric station. As I've said, 82% of our viewers and listeners live outside London. But this focus on crime, if it works in London and if you crack London, well, perhaps the rest of the country could follow, depending on the success Reform UK has. Peter Blexley is a former Metropolitan Police detective, a crime commentator here on Talk. Peter, you're very welcome to the programme. What does Nigel Farage need to do to restore law and order to London? And a very happy new year to you as well.
And to you too. He's going to face a Herculean task because generations of senior police officers will simply obstruct him at every corner. Of that, regrettably, I'm convinced, because they have talked themselves into the position whereby everything they do is right, everything from the past was elitist or was racist or was misogynistic and must be ignored, and therefore there is no blend in contemporary policing of the good from the past and from the good from the current and future in terms of advances in technology. So he's going to face a massive, massive task in trying to convince senior police officers to have a rethink, to look at how they do things, to improve them, to value what worked in days gone by, and therefore move forward with the kind of police service that the public want and need and deserve.
It's interesting you mention that, need and deserve and want as well. I'm sure there were many, many people right across the country who wanted to take part in different New Year's Eve celebrations and fireworks displays and so on that had been happening. We know that so many of those public events now have been shut down. They haven't happened at all. There wasn't one at all in Belfast. I don't think that was about safety concerns. I think that was about money. But Primrose Hill in London, very popular spot for people to watch the fireworks over the city. Well, it was boarded up. It was essentially cordoned off because the police said they didn't have the resources to police it. They did have the resources, and rightly policed a pro-Palestinian protest and actually took some action there that I think was good to push them back, although I'm not sure they made any arrests for people saying globalising Intifada. The point, I suppose, Peter, is that when there are events that people want the police to help them with, and to say, right, you need a few bobbies on the beat around here to help us make this safe. There doesn't seem to be the bandwidth, the resources to do that.
And the police are quite simply, together with the other authorities that were responsible for this decision to close Primrose Hill, it wasn't ultimately the Met Police's decision. It was a decision collaboratively taken, but primarily by others. But regardless, that decision, of course, was based on a lot of the advice that the police gave. Now, Primrose Hill, for your audience that live outside of London, is a very well-heeled part of London. Very expensive properties. You'll find television executives and any other titans of industry and very wealthy people living there. And it gets blighted by crime, like so many other places that with the length and breadth of the country. And of course, the wealthy residents are always up in arms about it. The actual hill is a beautiful viewing location to see all of London. You get a beautiful view from there. And of course, on fireworks night, New Year's Eve, it would have been wonderful if 30,000 people could have gathered there. But the authorities said, no, it's not happening. And they boarded it up with ugly, unsightly fencing. Fenced off from the public. Don't go and enjoy it. Don't walk your dog. Don't view the fireworks. A dreadful, dreadful decision, which is against the will of the majority of law-abiding people. But are the police listening to that? Are the authorities listening to that? Do we actually have an establishment that serves the public, or do we have an establishment that seeks to enslave the public? Because that's what it looks like, that's what it feels like, and therefore that must actually be what it is.
Peter, so much common sense spoken. Imagine a scenario where someone would want more common sense from you, perhaps some stories from your past. What would you recommend they do?
I strongly recommend they go to peterblacksley.com and buy tickets for my nationwide tour, 140 theatres, one near you, which starts next week. And thank you very much.
Excellent stuff. And my father and his mystery female companion are going to the one in Belfast. They're looking forward to that, Peter. So thank you, Peter Blexley, former Metropolitan Police detective and our crime commentator here at Talk. Loads of people getting in touch. Sadiq Khan wouldn't finance the Primrose Hill vantage point for the fireworks, but for sure he will find money for Islamic activities, alleges Reg. Brad in Cambridge says, what makes me even angrier about paying this killer 240 grand is that he only receives £7,500 of it. The rest goes to blood-sucking human rights lawyers and costs. The people making money out of this immigrant industry are the lawyers and the hotel owners, says Brad in Cambridge. Thank you to Sean in Gloucester. He says, good morning, Peter. Hi, Sean. I hope 2026 brings an end to this rancid government. If Keith Stalin's position is under threat by his own party and they're looking to replace him, he is such a spiteful, vindictive cretin. He will call a general election knowing the Labour Party will be wiped out. We live in hope anyway. It is all we have left, says Sean in Gloucester. Well, one of his former advisors, one of the people really high up in Downing Street, the director of strategy, apparently they had one, is a guy called Paul Ovenden. We're hoping to speak to him later in the programme. He hasn't got back to us just yet, but I hope he does. And he has talked about the stakeholder state. He has written this really quite interesting article, which actually comes into the Alaa Abdel El Fattah story, the Egyptian who was given citizenship here. And he says his designation as a high priority for the government came as a surprise to me, but I can't help but marvel at all he has done to reveal the true nature of the state to his fellow British citizenships. It's democracy activist. For me, we owe him. He's being sarcastic when he says that Whitehall went on and on and on about him, all the civil servants and those around him, and quite a number of celebrities as well, saying what a wonderful human rights, marvellous human person he was, and he should be out of prison. And of course he was released from prison. Lo and behold, there were many, many pieces of information that were not told to ministers. I know this for a fact because I spoke to one of them very recently, Gillian Keegan. She was the Education Secretary. She was for a while a Foreign Office Minister. She was told, got to get this guy out, got to bring him to the country. He's a British citizen. And at no point, she confirmed to me on the record, she said at no point was she told about the tweets. At no point was she told about his anti-Semitism, about his anti-Britishness, about his anti-whiteness. There is so much to this story that needs to come out and hasn't. And Gillian Keegan, in fairness to her, former Education Secretary, former Foreign Office Minister, has put some of that information in the public domain. On Iran as well, we will be talking about that in just a second, actually, with Simon Diggins, the military expert. And this texter has a really good point. Says, of course, many in the media aren't covering the potential fall of the Iranian regime. Why would they want the demise of Israel's principal adversary? Well, you may ask. And I'll ask Simon about that whole issue and the live rounds as well that the Iranian regime are using on its people. 7 of them dead already. Why are they protesting? What are they going to get out of it? And how does it affect us too, of course? That's the key question. So stay with us for all of that here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Elisa in Chelmsford, who says, Peter, can you imagine how the families of those murdered victims feel about this Islamist murderer receiving thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money? Our justice system is an absolute joke. It is completely unacceptable. Elisa is talking about the story, our main story today, about the Islamist killer winning a £240,000 legal battle. You're paying that money. Not only did you pay for him to be banged up after he murdered 2 people, he then took a prison officer hostage, and then he was put in isolation because of that. And then he says that was a breach of his human rights because it involved him getting severe depression. I mean, what about the human rights of the prison officer? What about the human rights of the people who were murdered? What about the human rights of their families? It is beyond parody. Absolutely crazy. Right then, I want to talk about a number of other issues, and rightly Jake texted in and said, why aren't you talking about Iran? That is what I want to talk about now, actually, with Colonel Simon Diggins, the military and defence analyst. Simon, we're now into, I think, day 5 of these protests against the regime. I wonder, we've seen this bubble up at various points. It's interesting, you seem to have a combination of not just the students and those who will often protest against the horrendous Iranian regime, who were often part of previous protests, but the bazaar owners, the sort of people who are the kind of middle-class shopkeepers who are rising up against the regime as well. 52% inflation in Iran. Just tell us your thoughts on this. Where does it lead? And actually, the reformist president of Iran, not on the security side, of course, because that's controlled by the mullahs, but he's saying that actually we could have some dialogue, or they could have some dialogue with the protesters and perhaps listen to their concerns. I wonder how seriously you take that.
Peter, good morning to you and Happy New Year to you. And
Happy New Year.
Was listening to as well. No, I think this is a very serious breakdown of law and order within Iran itself. We have, of course, seen this before. We saw this a couple of years ago with the protests over the hijab, and in previous areas when there's been a particular problem with their economy. They've also had serious rioting and disorder, and every time there's been violent suppression by the regime. And as you rightly point out, we've got a strange sort of government in Iran. We've got one government that basically looks not very dissimilar from a sort of Western democracy with presidents and a parliament and majlis and everything. Then you have this parallel government, which essentially is run by the mullahs and by the Revolutionary Guard Corps, who do the hard hitting and the brutal suppression from there. But you're right. I mean, it's now hitting almost everybody in the country. 50% of the population are deemed to be beneath the poverty line. As you said, 52% inflation, and their currency has basically collapsed. I mean, last year, and the figures are still astonishing, but last year it was 700,000 reals to the dollar, and this year it's 1.25 million. I mean, and that means anything that has to come into the country, they're paying nearly double the price for. So that's the pressure which it's there, and that and the pretty comprehensive defeat of their nuclear program. They're not complete defeat, but comprehensive defeating of their nuclear program.
And this is the point for the priorities as well, because if you're in Iran, do you want them to get involved with Gaza? Do you want them to be, Israel's greatest enemy? Do you want them to focus on advancing the nuclear program that was, of course, put into chaos by the 12-day war that Israel waged there a few months ago? Or actually, do you want to focus on the problems that are in Iran at the moment and the standard of living and the problems that you've just outlined there, Simon?
Absolutely, and I think that's where this protest comes through. So in the past, the regime has always used their kind of chief enemy to Israel to placard as the way, so they get out of jail card. But this time it's not working. That's completely collapsed. Their whole sort of regional foreign policy across the Middle East, Hezbollah, Hamas support, Houthi support, has basically collapsed. And then they got a good kicking from the Americans and from the Israelis, and quite right too. So all of that has collapsed. So their raison d'etre has collapsed. But I think the problem is they've got no means of getting out of it. You talked about the moderate president. Said we've got to talk to people, but actually, does he have the ability to talk to people? Can he make a bit of a difference? And I'm not sure that is the case at the moment. The real issue, I think, is what happens next. What people are looking at is, could there be some kind of sort of catastrophic collapse of the regime with no real power, no real authority, and what might the results of that be? And I think that's what people are worried about, and where that might fall out from in the future because of the implications. Security in the Gulf region, oil supplies to various countries, which they have deals with, and then the country itself, Iran, has a sort of the ability to break apart. There are bits of Iran who are not, if you like, the Farsi people, the Persian people at the heart of it. There is a sort of ethnic minority elements around the fringes of them, all of whom have got to some extent desire for greater autonomy and greater power. So there is a real danger that if this regime completely collapses, that the implications across the Middle East will be another wave of instability and disorder, and we need to be prepared for it.
Let's talk about the story on the front page of the Times here, something we've talked about on a number of occasions, Simon, but a development today. Sir Keir Starmer's aide, who is the Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner, a guy called David Johnson, says that new legislation is eating at the very fabric of the armed forces. He's been interviewed by the Times' defence editor, Larissa Brown. He says the proposed bill, this is on prosecuting soldiers, and it has very, very big implications for recruitment, for what the SAS does now, for example. He says the proposed bill is imbalanced and give the families of soldiers and civilians killed by terrorists in Northern Ireland false hope because they're unlikely to see justice. He's not the first person, of course, who said this. We've had that letter from senior SAS people. We've had a letter to the Times as well from other senior generals and people who've run the army previously. Was Keir Starmer going to listen to this? Because it seems that it's an imperfect issue. I worked on this issue in the Northern Ireland office when I was a special advisor. We also have the fact that we're more than a quarter of a century on from the Belfast Agreement, which was meant to solve Northern Ireland and did in many ways. But this issue is still a huge one and a live one and has many implications for soldiers serving right now.
No, I think I know David Johnson, and I absolutely agree with him and what he's saying. But if everything we do as soldiers now is in 30 years' time going to be raked over by the next generation of kind of human rights lawyers, then it's very difficult to try and persuade soldiers to think actually do what you do your job, do it properly, do it safely, do it under orders because you're going to be okay. Because maybe you won't be okay because somebody's going to invent a way of looking at it from there. So he's right about that. He's also absolutely right about the imbalance and the injustice. The reality of life is that there's some, and Northern Ireland is a tragedy for the whole of our United Kingdom. But 3,300 people were killed in Northern Ireland. Of that number, about 300 were killed by security forces. Over 3,000 were killed by terrorists, the majority of whom murdered by the IRA. Now, there's going to be no justice at all for the victims of IRA or also unionist violence, because unlike the British Army and the security forces, they have no records. Even their weapons are put out of use, were decommissioned, so we can't even trace the records from them. And they have been extremely reluctant.
And this is the point: the army has records. I think you perhaps meant loyalists rather than unionists there, but yes, it is interesting that there are, of course, the records of the army. We know that this is something that will be wrecked over for a long time to come. It is quite a significant intervention. Very, very interesting. And speaking of the Times newspaper, which seems to be a bit of a theme, there's a letter from one on Simon Diggins, Colonel, retired Rickmansworth, Hertfordshire, who has, and Simon, I don't often disagree with you, but on my programmes, as you know, we disagree without being disagreeable. Why don't you tell me why Shamima Begum, for people who haven't had the benefit of reading this very nuanced and thoughtful letter, why should she be allowed to return to this country in your view?
In my view, because whilst what she said and what she's done when she was in Syria were utterly objectionable and completely odious. I absolutely loathe Islamism and everything that goes with it. When she was trafficked to Syria, and she was trafficked, she was groomed online and persuaded by a man who it turns out to be a Canadian intelligence asset. She was persuaded to go to Syria and she was a 15-year-old at this point. Within 9 days of arriving in Syria, she was then married off to some Dutch-born Islamists. This is basically child sex trafficking. And what things she said, what she did, were completely objectionable. The reality of life is, I think the reason she's been kept out of the country is not particularly anything she's done, but actually because it showed up, highlights, if you like, the utter failure of our authorities over time to cope with and deal with Islamism. And its pernicious, disorientating, subversive form in this country. Rather than bring someone back like that, who expose the problems, expose the issues that have faced people in this country, we keep her out of the country, and hopefully it will go away. Plus, I rather fear there's also the kind of murky intelligence side, where they're trying to protect a source, though this source has actually been widely blown, including in the Canadian Parliament. So in my view, she should be brought back to this country. She is British. She had a British passport. She was born in this country. I think her grandparents were Irish.
She's Bangladeshi nationality as well. Could she not go there? And also, if she comes to this country, Simon, should she face trial?
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. There's no question of hiding from what she's done. She must bear full responsibility for what she's done. But she's British. She has a British passport. She had a British passport. It was removed from her. She had a British passport. She should come to this country and she should face trial for what she's done. But basically, you bring her back. She was a child. She was 15 when she was actually in Syria, which means the grooming may have started when she was 13 or 14. Barely, not something.
Although we do have many examples, Simon, of ISIS brides, as they're often called, who have come back to this country, have been told, slap on the wrist, and basically said, you shouldn't have done that. But people who say, I've made a terrible mistake here. But that wasn't the case with Shamima Begum. Do you think that's because she was a cause célèbre, or do you think it is for other reasons?
I think the cause célèbre. I'd be interested to know whether people would come back, but she was very prominent, and she made a thing about being prominent in the same way as a lot of people who want to be young influencers and make herself prominent from there, and that was probably very extremely foolish. But she suffered enormously. She lost 3 children when she was over there. But the decision was a very arbitrary decision by the last government, and I think actually in time, with reflection, we can look at this and go, do you know what? Let's be honest about what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with somebody who, as a child, was trafficked basically for sex. She marries this man within 9 days of arriving in Syria, produces 3 children who die, and now she's to be kept out of the country because she has she has a parental link to Bangladesh, but there's no links with the other. She hasn't got a Bangladeshi passport. Bangladesh doesn't claim her as one of their own. She's British. She's as British as I am. My mother's Irish. I can claim a heritage like that, which is also different from the commission I had in the British Army. So I think what we should do is bring her back to this country, face trial for what she's done, and learn what's happened. How was she subverted? How was she supported? What was the propaganda that she was subjected to? And make sure we tackle that, because that's the real issue. It's the extent to which even now, amongst some of the expatriate Muslim communities we've got in this country, where Islamist propaganda is still alive and well, and keeping someone like her out of the country is stopping us from dealing with that real error, with that real kind of poison that's eating away inside our Muslim communities. And I think we should bring her back, give her the chance to state a case, stand trial, and deal with it that way, rather than what we're doing at the moment, which is basically keeping a young woman in a refugee camp indefinitely. Is that what we're going to do? That really seems cruel.
My sympathy for Shamima Begum is limited, Simon, but I see where you're coming from, and that is a typically thoughtful analysis that is, as usual, when I speak to you, made me think. So thank you, Simon Diggins there, Colonel Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst there. What do you think about what he said about Shamima Begum there? Should we bring her back and have her stand trial here? If she goes to prison, we'll have to pay for that. She's in this camp at the moment. She could, in theory, be a really, really big threat to this country. country? What about the murky intelligence world that Simon was talking about there? Maybe things they don't want to be turned up about how she got there, and what on the radicalisation of young people, not just Muslim people but others, of course, by Islamists. There's lots to discuss on all of that. I'd love you to give me a ring. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Trevor in Harrow says, good morning and Happy New Year, Peter. Shamima Begum went out to Syria voluntarily, behind her parents' back, knowing full well what she was doing. She's only a few months away from being 16, which the Labour government says is old enough to vote and make up your own mind. She has never fully apologised and will be a recruiting sergeant for the cause in the UK. Isn't this already run in most of our prisons? It's like throwing petrol on a fire, says Trevor. Well, interestingly, I would recommend, if you're really interested in this issue, I would go back to the documentary maker we spoke to. I think on Wednesday we spoke to that documentary maker, and he has interviewed her on a number of occasions and says her story has changed a number of times. There are lots of other issues there. Thanks to Mac in Glasgow, who says, I'm sick of hearing ECHR protecting prisoners. Prisons are the places of punishment. When you enter prison, your rights are taken away. The prisoner deserved to be put in isolation. And to be that he was depressed because of it, he shouldn't have done it. ECHR should protect the victims of crime and not people committing the crimes. Happy New Year and a great show as always, Mac. I agree with everything you're saying there. I do think that we should give prisoners 4 things. I think we should give them food, water, medical attention and shelter, and I think that everything else should be earned. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
I have confidence in the Conservatives, and I have confidence in the energy and combativeness of Kenny.
But the public don't seem to be. The public don't seem to agree with you.
Let's see.
Now the Royal soap opera meets the Epstein files.
Prince Andrew's ties to Epstein already represent one of the monarchy's greatest reputational meltdowns.
This 10-page birthday letter you wrote to Jeffrey Epstein makes a pretty cringeworthy reading.
I find them very embarrassing to see.
First convicted, first indicted, you continued a business and personal friendship.
It was not a business
Not a business relationship.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Jake has been in touch again, as promised. I'm going to read out his message. He says, if Iran could do this to their own population, talking about killing them with live ammunition fired into protests that are happening there, what makes the activists think Hamas didn't do that? I mean, they're so quick to blame Israel. This should make them think twice about what they say. I now believe Israel is totally vindicated. Penny in Essex says, hi Peter, how can a murderer be given all that compensation? I've had to read that twice. What about the victims and their loved ones? It is totally beyond belief. You don't reward someone for murder. I dread to think what will happen this year with the ECHR and government. And thank you to Jason. He says Shamima Begum will probably be allowed to sue the government for revoking her citizenship if allowed to return. She needs to be left where she is. And Jason also asked the very reasonable question about Peter Bleksley, saying, when I see and hear Peter Bleksley, I always hear him saying, "Yo, nicked," in my head, literally every time. I did actually once get Peter Bleksley on air to say, "Get your trousers on, sunshine, you're nicked." He did say that. I think if the Sweeney were to be remade, he would be my #1 choice to be the new Jack Regan. I think he is Jack Regan 2.0. Speaking of people who resemble prominent figures, Maxwell Marlowe has often been compared to Jacob Rees-Mogg in looks, but not always in outlook. Maxwell is with me now. A very happy New Year to you. He's Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. And on a very serious note, Maxwell, the poor are getting poorer under Labour. UK's most affluent households faring best under the government.
Absolutely. Well, Happy New Year, Peter. It's good to see you again. Yes, so there's some new analysis that's come out from Retail Economics and the Centre for Policy Studies, which shows that since the government came in, 2.1% is the amount of cash that the poorest households are doing without. So it basically means that all of the new budgets that have been put in, all of the big tax rises, they've hit the poorest the hardest. The richest are doing fine. Since the Labour government came in, their spending power has gone up by about 40% or odd. But again, it is the poorest. Time and time again, we tell the government, if whenever you put up taxes on anything in the economy, you end up having a tax on the poorest, because if you tax a company, if you tax shares, if you tax assets, it all means that essentially companies can't bring prices down on their goods. And who pays the most in shops and for services? It's the poorest. They're not saving, they can't invest, etc., etc. So therefore, whenever we're looking to raise money for the state, we see those taxes go up on the poorest. It's a tale as old as time, and no one ever listens. But unfortunately, it is absolutely true.
Tell me as well about some of the research. This is a Centre for Policy Studies that you just referenced there, one of the think tanks in Westminster. They have done the sums and say that if you're an earner of something like if you have a household income of £50,000 a year, which a lot of people do, the average salary is of course about £36,000 a year. But if you two people working in the home, you may well have £50,000 or more. Those people are going to lose out about £500 a year, whereas people on welfare will be better off, and crucially pensioners will be better off as well. It's interesting, I'm sure you've read this article by Paul Ovenden, who is a former Director of Strategy to Keir Starmer as well, saying that he thinks the triple lock should be abandoned and that Keir Starmer should have the determination to do that. I always find, I don't know if you're in this position, but I often find people in the think tank world like yourself who are free to say roughly what they want. People who've left government, people who aren't government ministers anymore, people who don't have to make the decision are often, or ever likely to be in a position where they make the decision, often say, oh yes, we've got to scrap the triple lock. But find me the politician who will go into an election saying, oh yeah, by the way, those people who always vote in huge numbers, pensioners, we're going to scrap the triple lock. The fairness aspect comes into all these numbers, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right insofar as, people like me we're essentially just, interested parties. We look at lots of research, lots of numbers, we do lots of calculations. There is a consensus across the board, really, with any think tank on the left or on the right or even down the middle. The triple lock is too much, it's too egregious. So, for example, if we look at the CPS's own calculations, we find that, if you take forward the Labour government's idea of the quadruple lock, which is that, if your only income when you're retired is from the state pension, by the end of 2030-31, you will be better off by £537 a year. And I think that's really important because, unfortunately, pensioners are not as economically active. Indeed, if you look at an economics textbook, they're not seen as economically active.
Well, they can't work, most of them anyway.
Exactly.
And that's the point.
And this is the thing. So for the avoidance of doubt for, talks, listeners and viewers, and, I'm on your show quite a lot, I'm aware of where people stand. The state pension is a qualified benefit. You have to pay in for a certain number of years through national insurance in order to qualify for it. But from that point forward, it's a standard benefit. If you read the Pensions Act, which is, the latest iteration of how the state pension is set out, in Part 1, Section 1, Line 1, it says this Act creates a benefit called the state pension. So unfortunately, it is a benefit. So, we need to be looking at those sorts of areas where we can start cutting. And, you've mentioned already universal credit. The Conservatives and Reform have both said they're going to come for universal credit. And the only politicians who said we should have a think again about the triple lock is actually Richard Tice in the Reform Party, which is interesting because if you look at who wants to vote for reform, a lot of them are pensioners.
Yeah.
But if you speak to people like my grandmother, for example, and I've just been out over Christmas, we're actually discussing this quite a lot. She's very politically involved. She likes reading the news and watching great shows like Talk. She said, I'm actually completely okay with the triple lock going because I know that you're paying for it. My grandson, her grandchildren are paying for these benefits. And
although if you're a pensioner struggling on an income, you may well be very, very grateful for it. Well, listen, I'm delighted that both you and your granny watch this programme, and a very big hello to her. Maxwell, thank you. We'll talk more, I'm sure, in 2026. Maxwell Marlowe, their Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. Lots of people getting in touch about Shamima Begum, including Leslie. He says Begum wasn't 15 when she said knowing beheadings were being carried out didn't faze her. Leave her where she is. Another person says, my thinking is this government might as well bring her back to the UK. This would just go with all the stupid things they have done. What would be new? That's John in Poole there. Shane says, I'm shocked and surprised that someone like Colonel Simon Diggins is advocating the return of a foreign citizen to our shores in Shamima Begum, someone who was deeply involved in the ISIS terrorist state and advocated all that it did and carried out. I would urge you to read Simon's letter in the Times today. Mary in County Down says it's not about sympathy with Shamima Begum, it's about fair and compassionate treatment of a British woman. We're hosting foreign male Islamist terrorists and rapists and allowing them freedom in our country, yet we're excluding a young British woman. The government needs to do the right thing and bring her back. What do you make of this? What do you think about this? And what do you think as well about the Islamist killer winning £7,500 because he was depressed, because he was taken away from other prisoners, because he took a prison officer hostage? He'd already killed 2 people, by the way. We'll get into all of this with Paul Embry. He's a writer and trained unionist. We'll talk to him in a second. We'll make sure we talk about the National Trust as well, where a volunteer who pointed out spelling mistakes has been banned from helping out. Seriously, this is absolutely crazy. We'll talk about all of that. We'll take your calls as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Plenty to come between now and 1 o'clock.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa, and many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the Channel crossing as the dangerous bit, but actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many, many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants, and as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in the desert. About the UK and how much awareness. Please understand the scale of what we are dealing with here with very, very limited resources. Once again, people come in from charities, from NGOs, they use warm words, and the authorities here told me the only thing that we ever get is maybe a few toothbrushes and some nappies for the babies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company here on Talk. I'm here right through to 1 o'clock, and indeed tomorrow 10 to 1 and Sunday 10 to 1, and I'm doing Drive all of next week as Jeremy Kyle takes over breakfast between 6 and 10. So many big stories today. The Islamist killer winning a £250,000 battle over his human rights. He gets $7.5 grand into his hand because he says that because he was taken away from other prisoners and put in isolation, that affected his mental health. He got depressed. Well, what about the mental health? What about the human rights of the two people he murdered, their families, and indeed the prison officer he took hostage? Honestly, it is just absolutely ludicrous. The one-in, one-out migrant returns deal with France has been branded a joke. Figures show Britain has accepted more people than it's sent back. We'll talk as well about Shamima Begum, whether she should come back to the UK. We think the European Convention Court of Human Rights is going to have something to say about that. We'll talk about the Scottish pro-Palestinian activists vandalising an Edinburgh area factory in the first hours of 2026. We'll talk about newborn babies being given digital ID, whether digital ID actually works, and a story which I spotted this morning about the National Trust blacklisting a volunteer who pointed out spelling mistakes. Yes, really. Lots to discuss. We're going to take your calls as much as we can between now and 1 o'clock. In fact, we have one just ready to go in just a second from Ashley. 0344 499 1000 is the number Ashley called, and you can too. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note as well. You can do that through WhatsApp. You can also send me a text message through WhatsApp, and you can ring me as well, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, as promised, let's go to Ashley in London. This is about the Islamist who has won a £250,000 legal battle. This is a big issue Robert Jenrick has raised at the Shadow Justice Secretary. Ashley, you're very welcome to the programme. What's your take on it?
Morning, Peter. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
My take on it is simply that I wonder how much money the lawyers are earning out of this, firstly.
Well, a heck of a lot. I mean, the legal bill is 230 grand.
That's my point, right? So you have to look. The ECHR, if they use ECHR in this, we don't stand a hope in hell with Shamima Begum. And if she gets the right to come back, which I can just see it now, Starmer saying, well, I didn't want her to come back, but we had no choice.
Although, in fairness, the decision was made in 2019. It's been, nearly 7 years since that happened, and she hasn't come back, and she hasn't been successful in her attempt to come back. So it has been staved off for some time, Ashley.
She hasn't, but obviously now with the ECHR wishing to nose their way into this via her lawyers. Just imagine what sort of compensation that she's and her lawyers are going to be after. Whether she gets it or whether it's the lawyers, you have to look at the motive with these lawyers.
Well, they want to earn a living. I mean, listen, I think it's, I probably wouldn't do it myself, to be brutally honest, but, it's one of those questions when you talk about the lawyers, and also when, specifically when it comes to human rights some of the time, but also things like, migrant hotels and stuff. Should we blame those people for making money out of stupid government policy, for example? I know it's maybe a side issue, but it's just one worth perhaps raising.
Well, I just think that there should be limited access to them with a limited amount of money. My friend's a criminal lawyer, and with typical cases in the UK, when they're defending someone, their fees are extremely limited. If anything, it's the opposite. They haven't got the option of earning the sort of money that these guys are by them taking these cases on.
It's that thing as well. A relative of mine involved in some legal action that's happening privately, and they want it all to be over as quickly as possible, so it'll be as small a bill as possible. Whereas when it's public money, when it's legal aid, you don't care how much it costs if you're in legal aid.
No, you don't. But going on to another point with Shamima Begum is that this is a person, if she came back, firstly, what she's learnt out there, what she's done out there, but also the effect of everything. She's never going to work, ever going to work, is she? I mean, she's not going to be a productive member of society because her reputation is going to precede her. She is a breeding ground for further potential.
She could face trial here in the UK.
But she'll probably be tried as a kid. She was 15 when she went out there. So the reality of it is that do you really see her the level of evidence against her in regards to her serving significant time. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's one of the biggest concerns that most people have here. Not the fact that she comes back, but the way, knowing our legal system the way it is, she's probably going to be under
I think it's a very fair point in terms of the trust in the system, but of course it has to work, and if not in that case, but in many, many others. Ashley, a lot of common sense there this morning. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I've just got to move on, but I'll just read a couple of other messages, including from Phil, who says we should not bring back Shamima Begum as she committed her crimes in other countries, so should be tried there, not here. Ian says, Happy New Year, Peter. Thank you, Ian, and to you. Denial is a trap that virtuous love to fall into. Begum is a problem that grew in Britain. We need to accept that. We need to deal with it in Britain and thus deal with its root cause as to improve our country, not sing la 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 and use exclusion to avoid dealing with the problems we face, as abhorrent as an individual's actions seem when viewed from a sofa. Ian, that's a very interesting perspective. I think Simon Dickens would agree with you. I think Mary in County Down would agree with you. Whatever your perspective on this, let me know. 0344 499 1000. Just want to go back to that Islamist killer winning the 240 grand legal battle over his human rights. Paul Embry is with me now, a writer and trade unionist. He's also author of Despised, Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class. Paul, you're very welcome to the programme. And Happy New Year to you. What do you make of the fact that this has happened? He's got 7.5 grand into his hand. This is someone who murdered 2 people and took a prison officer hostage.
Yeah, good morning, Peter.
Morning.
Happy New Year to you. I mean, look, this chap is clearly a very nasty piece of work, and I think it will stick in the craw of most people to think that any amount of money is going to him in compensation. I mean, you touched on it with your previous call, and most of it is taken up in legal costs, of course. The compensation of £7,500 that's going to him is relatively in the great scheme of things, relatively insignificant compared to the £234,000 legal bill. But I mean, in some respects, look, you can't really blame his lawyers if they've identified that the law was not properly applied. And what that says to me is that if the High Court has judged that the law was not properly applied, then the law needs to be amended to prevent things like this happening again in the future. I think we need to be careful about getting into the business of attacking lawyers and attacking judges unless there's evidence they've been, biased or corrupt in a particular case.
So it's the application of the law you think we should, and what the law actually is. And you're right to a degree, I think. I think my opinion might be somewhere in the middle, but certainly what you're talking about here, because there are people like him who will take cases like this, knowing huge amounts of public, no skin off his nose. If he loses it, well, it's legal aid, who cares? It's only public money, he'll think. And if he wins it, well, he could get some compensation here. But there are so many people thinking about your exact point there about the law itself. There'll be people who think, hold on a second, prison authorities within the law, yeah, fair enough. We don't want them to have cruel, unusual, inhuman treatment of prisoners. But saying, right, you've murdered 2 people, you're in prison, you then take a prison officer hostage and we put you in isolation. Well, that's a really straightforward thing. And the problem is in our prisons, which have huge problems anyway, there's so many governors who will now think twice about doing that in future and think, oh, well, hold on, I'm going to get sued because of this.
Well, I tend to agree. I think isolation for somebody who was a double murderer and who killed an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old in a drugs dispute and then ambushed a prison officer and held him at knife point and threatened to kill him, and who is himself an extremist and an Islamist by all accounts. I think many people out there would say, well, actually, isolation for the rest of your life, mate, is not unreasonable.
Yeah.
Considering what you've done. We don't want cruel and inhumane punishments in our prisons, and of course we don't want prison authorities to be beyond the law. I mean, there may have been a time where things went on in prison that the rest of society and the authorities turn a blind eye to, and we don't want to go back to those days. But I think that most people would say, look, if the state cannot punish people by segregating people who have done the things that this individual has done without, lawyers coming in and courts deciding that it's a breach of the law, then the law fundamentally needs to change. If that means adapting the ECHR to make sure that these cases can't be litigated in the future, or even withdrawing from it, then that has to be seriously considered.
Let's talk about the one-in, one-out aspect of migrant returns, the deal with France. Figures showing Britain has now accepted more people than we've sent back. I just wonder, A, what you think of that, and B, whether you think anybody at all has been put off getting in a small boat because of the one-in, one-out policy, Paul.
Well, the scheme, as many of us predicted, I have to say, I mean, I tweeted in August that I suspected this scheme would not make more than a small dent in the overall figures.
I don't think you were alone in that prediction. I mean, Nostradamus you may be, Paul, but I think quite a few people might have thought the same thing at the time.
Yeah, I didn't have any special powers of wisdom, I have to say, unfortunately. But it's clearly been a complete failure. And let's be blunt, it was always going to be a failure because, I mean, the Home Office decided that, you know, there would be no more than about 50 people a week, I think, at a maximum, who were likely to be kicked out as part of this scheme. And of course, in the great scheme of things, that's a very small number. And it would be no deterrent whatsoever. And, you know, of course, we live in an interconnected world now with the media, and people who are in Calais who have got designs on coming to Britain, they know these things are going on. They know the news reports are saying that it will probably be no more than 50 people a week. And they're thinking, well, if that's the case, I'll take my chances. And the numbers that have arrived since, I think, have proved that it's been absolutely no disincentive at all. I mean, Starmer came to power and talked about smashing the gangs. The reality is that no gang, so far as I'm aware, has been smashed. You have to disincentivise the migrants themselves from coming in. I have to say, Peter, I think probably the only way that you're going to do that is having some sort of offshoring scheme, whether it's Rwanda, whether it's the Ascension Island, or wherever it may be. And unless you say to people, look, when you come here, you won't stay here.
The Albanian aspect does seem to have, the Albanian aspect of that policy seems to have some progress. Certainly, Paul, really interesting to talk to you. Paul Embry there, who is a writer and trade unionist. He is also author of Despised, Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class. Thank you for that. Really interesting on the Iranian aspect. We're going to talk about this later in the programme as well. Donald Trump telling the country that the US is, as he puts it, locked and loaded and will intervene if Tehran kills any more anti-regime protesters. We know about those demonstrations. We're talking about that with Simon Diggins. Now, on a post on Truth Social, Mr. Trump says that if the Islamic Republic killed peaceful protesters, the US would, as he puts it, come to their rescue. This is a very interesting aspect of this because, of course, Donald Trump has been very resistant on many occasions, actually, to take part in overseas military action. He did in regard to the Middle East with Israel particularly. He hates Iran, of course, but very, very interesting that this is what he has said. And he says the response actually from the Iran's Supreme National Security Council says we distinguish the positions of protesting shopkeepers from destructive elements, and Trump should know that America's interference in this internal matter equals the disruption of the entire region and the destruction of America's interests. So fighting talk from both of them. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. It'll be very interesting to see. We'll talk about that more a little bit later on in the programme when we talk to our guest, Catherine Perez Shakdam, who is an Iranian expert and executive director of We Believe in Israel. We'll talk to her a little bit later on. I just want to talk to Kevin in North Yorkshire now about Shamima Begum. Lots of people getting in touch about this and the European Court of Human Rights saying they're looking into this. Some people, including Simon Diggins and a couple of texters actually, thinking maybe she should come back and stand trial in this country. Maybe we could learn lessons and get to the root and expose how Islamism is so pernicious and how it spreads. Kevin, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter. Yeah, I was just wanting to say that I think under no circumstances should this young woman be allowed to come back to this country. She's put her stakes in a foreign flag, which was diametrically opposed to what we stand for. She oversaw the slavery and sexual abuse of young, I think it was Yazidi girls. She oversaw the fact that foreign soldiers were butchered and didn't affect her. She's put her flag quite firmly under that.
It's unlikely, though, isn't it, Kevin? In Syria, she'll face any justice whatsoever. If she comes here, maybe she could. Maybe we could actually get some justice from this situation.
I care not what the justice of this is. I care that the fact that it sets a firm standard and a firm position that if anybody goes out that wants to go out to a foreign country and work for terrorists, that this is potentially what can happen to them.
But surely a greater sanction, Kevin. Hold on a second. Surely a greater sanction would be for her to stand trial here in the UK, rather than saying you can do what you want against Britain's interests from a foreign land.
No, not at all. I think the message would be sent out that you're not going to change the ideology of these people. It is not going to happen. They are ideologically bent on this. And I don't know many 15-year-olds that have taken the flag and gone out to a foreign nation at that age and decided to do what they've done. She's ideologically lost in this. And anybody that's ideologically lost in this, if they want to go out there and do it, well, the message is you go out there and do it, but you're not coming back here because you've proven to everybody that you and not wanting to be part of this nation. She's taking the stance now. She's playing on the fact of the weak-minded individuals that think they want to do the moral and right thing and have them bring her back. And she should not be brought back under any circumstances. It's a fine example of what happens if you go down this route. We don't want these people in the country. We're fighting to get a lot of them out of this country now, and we need to set that example.
But she is from this country. She is British. She has nationality here, Kevin, as well. Don't we have some obligation to her for that?
So if somebody takes citizenship of another country, goes to America and commits a murder, or becomes part of a serious terrorist organisation in America, and they get put in prison, are we supposed to take them back because they're British?
But the point is, though, that she's unlikely to have a criminal sanction in Syria. But really interesting points there, Kevin, and thank you so much for the call. I appreciate that. Kevin in North Yorkshire, we're really properly debating this issue, and Kevin's a part of that, so thank you. If you want to get your voice heard on Shamima Begum or any other issue we're talking about today, please give me a call, 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about an absolutely ludicrous story in just a second about the National Trust. Now, many people feel that the National Trust has gone really, really woke, and that there are lots of things that have happened within it that shouldn't have. A volunteer at the National Trust banned from working there. We're talking about a volunteer, someone giving up their time to work at a stately home and show people around. Could there be anything more British than being a National Trust volunteer? Banned from working there after he pointed out a raft of spelling mistakes on his website and sent a strongly worded email. Andy Jones, who's 71, sent a dossier of thousands of misspellings and factual errors, which he had unearthed on his own initiative, to the charity's Director General, Hilary McGrady, in November. He followed up with her, with McGrady, and said, "I sincerely hope my work is helpful." The typos included toilet, spelled TOLIETS, words like permanent, take a peek, I hate that one when people say PEAK, while the name of a pre-Raphaelite artist was misspelt. Instead, a strongly worded complaint was sent to his local branch, and he was to quit as a volunteer. He then claims to have received a note to say that his comments were not in line with our organisational values. I love that. It's always people who talk about inclusivity who want to exclude people. What about people who know about spelling mistakes? As a fully paid up pedant myself, we will be discussing this with another one, Philip Kisley, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. Stay with us for that in just a second.
I have confidence in the Conservatives, and I have confidence in the energy and combativeness of Kemi.
But the public don't seem to be. The public don't seem to agree with you.
Let's see.
Now, the Royal soap opera meets the Epstein files.
Prince Andrew's ties to Epstein already represent one of the monarchy's greatest reputational meltdowns.
This 10-page birthday letter you wrote to Jeffrey Epstein makes a pretty cringeworthy reading.
I find them very embarrassing to see.
First convicted, first indicted, you continued a business and personal friendship.
It was not a business
Not a business relationship.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has got in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the main number. That we'll come back to your calls in just a second. But I want to talk now about this absolute absurdity of the National Trust. It's banned a volunteer from working after pointing out a raft of spelling mistakes. Now, he did send a slightly not great email as well, to be brutally honest, where he said still no reply, acknowledgement, let alone thanks from what he called the Irish Dame, O-I-R-I-S-H, which is not very nice, on over 400 hours spent on her crappy website, although he put an extra H in the word website. But he pointed out many misspellings and factual errors. Philip Kisley, a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, he was told, this man, Andy Jones, that his comments were not in line with our organisational values. Philip, perhaps the follow-up email wasn't great, but actually if someone points out errors, as sometimes they do on this programme, and say, actually, Peter, you got that wrong, that's actually quite helpful.
It is helpful, especially if there are thousands and thousands of errors and the person has spent 400 hours of their time unpaid to collate them and then point them out. I mean, it's always this thing, isn't it? When people start talking about values and alignment with their values, you just think about ideology, thought control, and punishment. Those are the words that come to my mind. And, you know, and if you digress, you then automatically become, you know, an unperson.
Sorry, Philip. Those views are not in line with our organisational values.
I know, and you're gonna cut me off straight away.
It is kind of it's quite sinister when people say that, not in line with our organisational values. There's always people who talk about things like inclusivity. This is not in the spirit of inclusivity. Therefore, we're going to exclude that person with those opinions.
Yes, and never speak to them again and absolutely punish them. Bearing in mind that this fella has stage 2 cancer as well. So there is a sense that all of this stuff is done in the most human terms possible. You know, they're going to punish him in the kindest way possible. They talk as well about relationship breakdown. So it's so inhuman. It's so awful. It's this kind of management speak of, you know, a pensioner who's ill, who's doing so much and is just so frustrated with this organisation that is totally captured and really needs de-radicalising.
Just tell us a bit more about that, actually, because the National, believe it or not, more people are members of the National Trust than every political party in the UK put together. The National Trust is, you know, in the absence of a Church of England, and, you know, the NHS and the National Trust are sort of the national religion of a lot of people. There are loads of people who love nothing better than going to a stately home at the weekend, having a bit of a poke around, having a nice scone and a cup of tea, and seeing how people lived previously. There are loads of National Trust properties. It should be a beacon. It should be a really, really good thing that Britain does brilliantly with so much incredible history. But as you say, it has been captured by the wokies.
It has, and there are so many examples. There's an example as well of gardeners who had been using the wrong language and saying the wrong things, and they were just cancelled immediately. But the National Trust couldn't give a single example of their bad behaviour. Now, the National Trust are keepers of our culture. You know, it's an incredibly important organisation, and language is a vehicle for that culture. So for, you know, someone who's volunteering to say, look, you've made all of these mistakes, you know, here's what you do to rectify them. As you say, Peter, they should be thanking him, but the ideology just comes through all the time here, and you can just see them, can't you, in a meeting, in a board meeting, saying, well, you know, this person is obviously a white supremacist because he wants decent syntax, he wants decent punctuation, he wants decent spelling. That's going to alienate all of the people who speak English as a second language. That's going to alienate people with learning learning disabilities, all of that kind of thing. You can see all of this kind of stuff. So you can see how absolutely radicalized they are. And if we are to deal with the heritage industry, and again, if we are to deal with education and the institutions and the media, we need to strip all of these institutions of this ideology, because it is the opposite of what it purports to be. It absolutely alienates everybody. You know, it is all about ideology.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting point. And listen, I will be brutally honest, I'm known as a bit of a pedant. My father it was a teacher, and my mother was as well, and they both gave me a lot of sort of grammatical instruction and so on. And when I worked in government, I was known as one of the biggest pedants around, actually, and there was a list of things that were acceptable, not acceptable, about all this sort of management speak and stuff I tried to get out of government parlance, like stakeholder and all those kind of ludicrous words, always fighting a losing battle. But there was one particular journalist who contacted me after I pointed out that she'd made an error in a report and simply said, "You wouldn't say that to me if I wasn't a woman," and basically accusing me of sexism. And I then said this to a female press officer I was working with, who's still in government actually as a press officer, and she said, "Peter, I'm happy to go on the record, I'm happy to put a statement out. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, male, female, gay, straight, whatever, immigrant, born in this country. If you make a grammatical error, Peter will point it out. If you make a mistake, Peter will go overboard to tell you that you made it wrong. You've done something wrong." So I think we need to be a bit more relaxed about this as well. And there's so many things that are imperfect. This show, for example, Philip, is imperfect. There are 3 hours. I'm going to say 1 or 2 things that are not exactly right. A second ago, I stumbled on my words there, for example. People sometimes text in, ring in and say, actually, the fact is this, or you've missed this, or alternatively, someone said earlier, why aren't you talking about Iran? I mean, we are, but we weren't doing it for the first half an hour, and people saying you should have done it maybe as the top story. That's okay. And people, including these senior leaders, need to be able to take some criticism. They need to be able to take, especially when someone's being constructive and saying, here's a website, loads of people are going to access that website, and there are loads of spelling errors on it. You need to fix it.
Well, it's just embarrassing as well that a big organisation like the National Trust is riddled with errors all over the place. So this is about clarity. And clarity is really, really important, especially when you're dealing with heritage and you're conserving something. Clarity is so important. And what we need to do is strip all of, if you're pointing something out that is wrong, we need to strip everything of the implications that come with it, which just aren't there. If you're saying that someone spelt something wrong, it doesn't mean you're a white supremacist.
Yeah, exactly.
or a raging misogynist.
But it comes back,
like
it may seem like a small thing, but it actually comes back to the fact that truth is dead. We're in a post-truth situation, and you can't just be saying, actually, you've spelt the word definitely wrong, or you're using this jargon which is going to lose everybody, and you should be a bit clearer in what you say. It's actually saying, well, you're not just saying that simply to be helpful in some way, or even if you are just a bit of a pedant, you're saying it for other reasons. You're saying it because you're a sexist. You're saying it because you're a white supremacist. It's this victim mentality that drives me crazy.
Well, it's demoralising as well for everybody, because most people know that that isn't the case. You're not pointing things out because you hate somebody. You're dealing with an error. It's as simple as that. And I think the more we get back to actually trying to have, levels of excellence that we try to attain, that we actually work to do the best we possibly can. And there is no sinister aspect to that. It's just we are trying to be the best we can. Then that works well. It works well in society. It works well in culture. It works well in personal relationships. And it works well with the economy as well. It's all good. There's nothing wrong with it.
Exactly. Totally agree. Philip, you're the best version of yourself on all occasions, including in that interview. Philip Kisley there, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, regular guest here on Talk. Always great to have him on. Reg says, I've been a fully paid up family member of the National Trust for the last 10 years. The cancellation is going through at lunchtime because of this story. Brian in Sheffield says, good morning, Peter, great show. How do you empathise with a pedant? There, spelt obviously T-H-E-R-E, T-H-E-I-R and T-H-E-Y''RE, says Brian in Sheffield. Thank you, Brian, who has spelt every word of his message correctly. Keith in Owa Street says if Simon Diggins wants Shamima Begum back, perhaps he can let her stay with him, because the vast majority do not want her back. We've been talking as well about the cost of living. Sandy has given me a ring from Suffolk. Lovely to talk to you, Sandy. Very happy New Year to you. Haven't spoken in a while. Tell me your thoughts on this.
Hello, Peter. I wanted to speak to you, please, and put you right on, as you're into facts this morning,
Go for it.
About the gentleman you had on earlier who was saying the triple lock is too much for pensioners. So I thought I'd actually give you some facts that he probably seems to be unaware of.
Go ahead, Sandy.
The basic state pension is £921 a month. If you receive that, you're not entitled to any benefits at all. Absolutely nothing. Now, from that £921 a month, these are some of the things one has to pay out for. You could have to pay management fees on a retirement property you're living on of £200 a month. Food, £200 a month. Council tax, £200 a month. Water, £40 a month. Gas and electric, £150 a month. Contents and buildings insurance, TV licence, phone and broadband. Now, if you add all those figures together, it comes to £1,005 a month. So that leaves you with nothing for the dentist, your clothes, haircuts, Christmas presents, boiler services, and if you want to run a car
and Sandy,
or go on holiday,
you
can't.
You're absolutely right.
Can I give you some more figures?
Well, let me just ask you. We don't have time for all of it, Sandy. But let me just ask you. First of all, I think all of that is absolutely reasonable and fine to make that point. The point is that not all pensioners are living on that money. Quite a few pensioners have quite a lot of money and quite a lot more than that, and they have a private pension and they've worked for that and they've put the money away, and I take nothing away from that, and good for them. But if you are saying to the younger generation, actually, you're probably not going to have any state pension. You're not going to have 921 quid. You're probably not going to have... I would be really surprised if the state pension exists in the same way as it does now when I retire, for example. And we're paying not to fund that and to fund those rises, because it's not just the money people have put in, it's extra money from the government in those rises as well. That is, of course, taxpayers' money. It's a fairness issue, is it not?
Yes, it is. And if you're getting a private pension as well, you're still contributing by paying a hell of a lot of tax. And our generation, who are age 60 plus now, we paid for our parents' pensions. Our parents paid for their parents' pensions. We didn't complain. It was the way of the world.
But also the triple lock didn't exist in the way that it does now. I mean, if someone said...
I will also say, Peter... I will also say, Peter, that if the government, you've got to realise, if you add every single tax together that we pay in this country, from capital gains tax to stamp duty to income tax to VAT, we're the highest taxed country in Europe. If our government choose to waste that tax on other things, that's not the fault of old people or young people. Spain and Germany pay a lot more.
Okay. Let me just ask you one more question before you go, Sandy. Do you think that the triple lock is fair?
Do I think it's fair?
Yes.
I think it should be a damn sight higher, Peter.
Okay.
A damn sight higher.
But you have loads of people who can't afford a home, which many pensioners have bought, and good for them for doing so. Take nothing away from that. Not being snippy or horrible about that. You have people who are, working really hard, who are paying an awful lot of tax, the tax that you mentioned there, who won't have the same rise in income, who won't have the same guaranteed rise in income that pensioners have, and have to deal with that from their perspectives. Do you think that's fair?
What I don't think is fair, Peter, is if you go in my local Tesco in Martlesham, there's people in their 80s in there still working on the tills because they can't afford to live on their state pension. And that's what's not fair, Peter.
Okay, Sandy, really appreciate your call. Thank you. Passionate from Sandy there in Suffolk. You're welcome to call anytime. We'll talk in just a second about Zoran Mandani, who is the new New York mayor. Can he be trusted on issues of anti-Semitism? And also the Scottish pro-Palestinian activist vandalising an Edinburgh factory linked to a plane programme in the first hours of 2026. We'll talk about that in the round as well, and a bit more about Iran too. Lots of people want to talk about that, and Shamima Begum. Get your voice on the air, just like Sandy did. 0344 499 1000. Nicole Lampert will join us in just a second. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Julia is back on Monday at 10 in this slot between 10 and 1. I'm here tomorrow on Sunday between 10 and 1. And of course, the big news on Monday is that Jeremy starts permanently doing breakfast between 6 and 10. That's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show on Monday morning between 6 and 10. 4 days a week he will be doing breakfast, and then Mark Dolan will be doing breakfast Friday to Sunday. Lots to discuss now about Zoran Mandami, who is the new mayor of New York. It has the largest population of Jewish people outside Israel. In one of his first acts in office, he has revoked the city's implementation of an anti-Semitism definition that includes some forms of Israel criticism. This is a sweeping rejection of what his predecessor did. I want to talk to Nicole Lambert about this and a number of other issues, including Iran. Nicole is a journalist and campaigner against anti-Semitism. Nicole, so far, so Zoran Mandami. I mean, I don't think people will be particularly shocked by this, but of course, there's so many New Yorkers, I spoke to one of them actually over the Christmas period, who think he's just, an absolutely wonderful person and he's a liberal, marvellous human being. Well, actually, if you want the freedom to be Jewish and to be a Zionist in New York, well, that's just taken a backseat under day one of his administration.
Hi, Peter. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing times for Jewish New Yorkers and the ones that weren't really keeping an eye on what was going on, because I think in America, Jewish people have tended to be Democrats, so they tended to vote for the Democrat incumbent. But what we've seen with Mamdani is a kind of Corbynization of the Democratic Party, at least in New York. As you say, it's kind of the most Jewish city in the world outside of Israel. Around 12% of New Yorkers are Jewish. And already he's changed a load of laws, including, so not only the definition of anti-Semitism, because he himself would fall foul of it, but also in terms of people being able to demonstrate outside synagogues. So he's making life a lot more dangerous for New Yorkers, as in America, as in the rest of the diaspora. There's an outsized number of anti-Semitic attacks, and this is a new mayor who's going to be encouraging them. So I'm very worried about all Jews in New York. He had around 33% of Jewish New Yorkers voting for him, which is a big, although it sounds like a lot, normally around 60% would vote for the Democrat incumbent. So some people did notice it. Others probably thought, oh, he'll leave us alone, it's scaremongering. But from day one, we're already seeing the danger of him, and I do worry about him.
Let's talk about this country and the danger of pro-Palestinian activists in Scotland. Just talk us through this story.
Well, for me, there's nothing pro-Palestine about it. It's pure treason. They attacked a Scottish factory that helps make arms for a company in Italy that helps with the F-35 jets. The F-35 jets is something that Britain is part of, Israel, America, a number of European countries. They're the top fighter jets. So although it's aimed ostensibly against Israel, really they're attacking us because these fighter jets are used by us, and actually we don't have enough of them because they cost so much money. So what they're doing is they're spending more money. They've gone to this place with hammers. They videoed themselves hammering computer equipment and all of this, and this is just treason. This is terrorism, and it needs to be taken seriously. We've had enough of this. We are at a dangerous time. We can see what's happening on the continent with Russia, and this is, Putin must be rubbing his hands with glee at these idiots.
Do you think perhaps there's actually been a better course of action by the police? We look at Newhall, for example, and the pro-Palestinian activists for Palestine Action there who are on hunger strike. Sometimes they're on hunger strike, sometimes they're not. But there are many people supporting them. And the police did seem to take greater action against them over the Christmas period, although I don't know if any arrests were made. I certainly didn't hear any. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And similarly, I don't know if any arrests were made. I didn't read about it anyway, for saying globalise the Intifada, which they appeared to do at points.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've seen them standing fast against the hunger strikers, unlike with the Egyptian person that they allowed in, where they were swayed by hunger strikes. In this particular case, I think they realised that once you give in to one person who's on hunger strike, then you give in to everybody, and then everyone in prison is going to be on hunger strike. So they have stood firm, which is really important, and those Palestine Action activists, alleged of a number of terrorist offences, are still in jail. So let's hope that perhaps this year we see a hardening of attitude when they realise this isn't just about the Jewish community. This is about our society and what we're allowed to tolerate and what we are not willing to tolerate. And one of them is not attacking our arms factories, and another one should be, as you say, not allowing hate speeches on our street.
Which brings us nicely to our next story. Gary Lineker, for it is he, went on a very challenging podcast with Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party, their deputy leader. I would strongly argue is anti-Semitic in my strongly held personal belief. Gary Lineker talking about the Palestinian issue with Zach Polanski. Let's just have a look at just 1 minute of this nonsense from the two.
I get my phone every day, and I cry most days when I see it. I mean, innocent kids being just killed, like snipers and bombs, and I mean it's just immeasurably wrong.
Like, it almost feels ridiculous that we have to say that children dying, or in fact anyone dying who's innocent, is wrong. Yet we do have politicians who seem to be turning away from it.
I find it extraordinary, really. I think most of the world sees it for what it is. Obviously, October the 7th was horrendous. We know that, but we also know that it didn't start on October the 7th. It started a long, long time ago. And of course, Israel has the right to defend itself, but then why doesn't Palestine have the right to defend itself?
Where to start?
Where to start, indeed. I mean, who's feeding Gary Lineker all of these images? There's been a ceasefire now for several months, and that's not to say that the end of the killing sadly is over. There's still little skirmishes between the IDF, which has also seen soldiers killed, and Hamas, but in general it's been a much more peaceful situation. Sadly for the people of Palestine, many of Gaza, there are people living in tents, which is horrendous. That's because Hamas still won't even accord to the first part of the deal, which it still has one hostage body, which it's not letting go of, let alone disarming. In fact, it's trying to take more control of Gaza.
And the irony, sorry to interrupt you, Nicole, but the irony of all of this is, you and I have spoken about this many times on this station and between ourselves as well privately. At no point does anybody want any innocent child or civilian man or woman to die, to be attacked, to be targeted. War is dreadful. War is horrible. It would be wonderful if it didn't happen. The point is that what we all want to do is free the Palestinians from Hamas. That is not what Gary Lineker seems to be saying. And this classic trope of, oh, well, the 7th of October was dreadful, but you know, but actually it has gone on a lot longer than that. And why can't the Palestinians defend themselves? Well, it's a lot more than defence of what happened on the 7th of October. I would question him about what actually happened on the 7th of October on those horrendous beatings, people who were burned, who were dragged through the streets, raped, taken as hostages, killed. Absolutely horrendous. And I mean, now he mentions it because he knows he has to. He has said absolutely nothing about that on Twitter at the time. He's also, oddly, said nothing about Iran. And we see an awful lot of people who are supporters of the pro-Palestinian cause who you would think, oh, hold on, you're against oppression. You're against people being told they can't have free speech. You're for freedom. Maybe those activists in Iran are things you'd like to comment on, but apparently it's all a bit difficult to report on, according to John Simpson of the BBC. Apparently it's all a bit difficult to cover. Well, it's not really, is it, Nicole?
I mean, that's absolutely fascinating. So John Simpson on Twitter X, he's saying that one of the reasons the BBC hasn't been really reporting on what's going on in Iran is because they don't have any reporters in there. We, as British taxpayers, we pay for BBC Persia, which, although they are based here in the UK, they obviously have contacts in Iran and know exactly what is going on. And this is, you know, in 1979, just for a bit of historical significance, there was a revolution, and there was this mix of the communists, the socialists, and the Islamists together to fight the Western Shah and to overthrow him, which is what happened. And then what happened was the Islamists then killed most of the socialists and communists. They strung them up. Certainly all the women were forced into hijabs. And that's what's been happening in Iran since. But, you know, one of the ironies of today is that we do see the far left
it's a really good point. The Red-Green Alliance of, guess what, communists, socialists and Islamists coming together again. And guess what, it hasn't worked out very well for Iran.
And actually that's what we see in the Green Party. So we see this anti-Zionist gay Jew, Zach Polanski, and just below him, you know, are Islamists, and you can see how it's not going to work. But you know, in Iran, who knows what is going to happen, because there's certainly people are on the streets and they are angry. And although there hasn't been enough of this on British television or in the newspapers, this is very much an important issue for Britain, and it's an important issue in many ways. But, you know, one is, of course, we are all obsessed with the Israel-Palestine war, but that wouldn't exist if Iran wasn't determined to try and end Israel.
And just briefly, on that note, actually, what do you make of Donald Trump saying that the US is locked and loaded and will intervene if Tehran kills any more anti-regime protesters?
I mean, I think, you know, let's hope, because if Iran's regime goes, the world will be a much safer place in many ways. You know, just the fact that Iran is helping to create the drones that Russia is using in Ukraine. This is how far the tentacles go. The Iran also funds the Houthis, which have been bombing British shipping in the Red Sea. So Iran is a danger to the world. So if something can be done against that regime, and what people in the streets in Iran are calling for is the pro-Western Shah to return, then we would see a very different world. And I've got a friend, Lily Moo, who's Persian, who has been very active in speaking up for Israel too. We've been in Israel together, and you know, and our dream is to one day walk down the streets of Tehran together. Yeah. And who knows? That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. Listen, thank you very much indeed, Nicole Lambert, the journalist and campaigner against anti-Semitism. Thank you for that. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch. Tracy says, Gary Lineker and Zach Polanski make me feel sick. On the National Trust, lots of people getting in touch. Graham and Bushy says, maybe the National Trust should be renamed the National Distrust. Mo and Leicester says, it sounds as if the National Trust are saying this man doesn't align with their values of incompetence. Sally in Surrey says, good morning, Peter. My husband and I cancelled our National Trust subscription about 2 or 3 years ago when this woke nonsense came to our attention. Also, many people we know also cancelled. I wonder how many others did too. Do you know there's a whole organisation called Restore Trust that you might be interested in, Sally? Maybe you know about it already, but the journalist Charles Moore, for example, writes a lot about this in The Spectator. It's called Restore Trust. You might want to Google them and see how they're trying to change the National Trust, bring it back to where it was. Also, many people know We also cancelled. I wonder how many others did too. Oh, and I'm a pedant too, says Sally. Good. I fume when sitting in an NHS waiting room, reading all the notices littered with spelling mistakes, punctuation errors, and eye-watering grammar. Happy New Year, says Sally. And sorry, well, thank you for that. And Pauline says, young people think it was easy for my generation to buy their house. All we could afford was the basic house, no heating, no garage, no furniture, and then we were hit with 15% interest rates. We didn't moan that wasn't fair. We simply had to improve our situation. I remember my own father telling me when they bought a house, my father and his mystery female companion had a home, I'm not allowed to mention her on air, in the 70s. They couldn't have people over. They literally couldn't have people over for a cup of tea and like a custard cream because they couldn't afford it, and they were both teachers. So that is sometimes part of it. The problem, Pauline, of course, is that there's so many people who can't even afford to get on the housing ladder at all, never mind all those other things that you mentioned. But it's a really good point, and in fairness, actually Sandy made some really good points earlier as well when she gave me a ring. Lots to discuss. We're going to talk in just a second about newborn babies given digital ID and pressure to scrap the whole scheme, in fact, because there's a poll out saying that the public opposes it. Stay with us.
I have confidence in the Conservatives, and I have confidence in the energy and combativeness of Kenny.
But the public don't seem to be. The public don't seem to agree with you.
Let's see.
Now, the Royal soap opera meets the Epstein files.
Prince Andrew's ties to Epstein already represent one of the monarchy's greatest reputational meltdowns.
This 10-page birthday letter you wrote to Jeffrey Epstein makes a pretty cringeworthy reading.
I find them very embarrassing to see.
First convicted, first indicted, you continued a business and personal friendship.
It was not a business
Not a business relationship.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, yesterday we learned that babies may be signed up for digital ID. It's optional, apparently, but it's really interesting that this huge policy that would take an awfully long time to implement is actually plummeting in terms of people's support for it. In June last year, 57% of people said they supported the introduction of a system of national identity cards, 25% against it. Same question was asked in December, and support had plummeted to 38%, opposition had jumped to 47%. Ross Clark is with me now, who's author of The Road to Southend Pier, One Man's Struggle Against the Surveillance Society. Ross, I think I don't know what digital ID actually solves. Do you think it'll work? Do you think it will actually be implemented to any degree? Will it actually be part of our lives? Because I know there are lots of people worried about it happening, and you're one of them, but actually, do you think it's actually going to go ahead?
Well, looking at the sort of plummet in popular support for it, I'd guess it's probably something the government will want to put aside now. I mean, it never was anything more than a gimmick to sort of try to persuade us that the government's trying to do something to tackle illegal migration when, you know, we know it's totally out of control. And the argument that Keir Starmer put forward was said, well, it'll stop illegal migrants getting jobs illegally in Britain. Well, that's a nonsense, because if you're working illegally, you're off the radar now. You won't have a national insurance number. Why should an employer who is illegally employing people now suddenly start asking for an ID card just because they've been introduced? So, I mean, it always was a nonsense, and I think public has sort of latched onto that and realised that it doesn't solve anything. And
what I worry about within all this is the idea that a digital ID will act as universal access to public services. We were originally told it's just about working, then unsurprisingly it expanded. But the point is that you're not going to have doctors and nurses saying, I'm terribly sorry, you don't have digital ID. I know there's blood spurting out of your arm, but we're not going to treat you because we can't establish that you have access to these services.
Yes, of course. It's the mission creep, which is part of all this surveillance stuff. And the same happened with CCTV cameras and these number plate recognition cameras. You know, they're sold to us initially. They help fight serious crime. But then, you know, within a few years, we found they were being used to sort of prosecute motorists whose bumpers were overhanging a yellow box junction, or turn right as took an illegal right turn where there was a small sign saying they couldn't do that, and all those sort of minor motoring offences are now being sort of prosecuted on enormous industrial scale thanks to these number plate recognition cameras. And that was never made clear to the public how they were going to be used. We never had a proper debate about how that technology was going to be introduced. And it will be the same with digital ID if it does get off the ground. You know, now it's just supposed to be about stopping illegal migrants working, but, you know, within a few years you'll be absolutely sure that it will be there to capture people with overdue library books and walking on cracks in the pavement and other...
Those things aren't going to happen.
The other kind of stuff. That's maybe a little exaggerated.
Walking on cracks in the pavement, that'll just give you bad luck, I've heard.
Yes, probably, but you know, it'll be the most minor of offences, and you know, look at the practicality things. Within a few years, we won't be able to go anywhere, do anything without our mobile phones. That's what's so obnoxious about all this.
Especially for people who don't want to have a smartphone, for example. And a lot of people, even younger people, sometimes want to go back to the dumb phones. Lots to discuss on all of that. No doubt we'll talk more in 2026. Thank you, Ross, and Happy New Year. Ross Clark there, author of The Road to Southend Pier, one-man struggle against the surveillance society. Dean in East London says, did Lineker mention the dying children in the likes of Nigeria and Sudan in that interview? Don't their lives matter? Well, it's a very good point, Dean, and I've made that point. I did a bit of a rant about it actually a few weeks ago about how Nigeria and Sudan specifically are just not mentioned by so many people, because guess what? Israel's always wrong, as we know. Mark in Ulster, I'm not sure, Alcester, says, I cry most days thinking about Gary Lineker's new £14 million Netflix contract. He does seem to be untouchable. If he said and retweeted those things about, I don't know, black people, lesbians, trans people and so on, but no, it's Jews, so it's fine. He can leave the BBC and can walk in to a £14 million contract. Honestly, the man is a total disgrace. Lots more to discuss, including on Iran and from the American angle as well, actually. We'll get this from all angles here on Talk. Stay with us.
Libya has become a major transit route for refugees and migrants from sub-Saharan Africa. And many of them come through Libya dreaming of getting to the UK, particularly from Sudan, where there has been a civil war waging for the last 2 years. And those asylum seekers or economic migrants who make it from Sudan to the UK have a 99% chance of being given leave to remain. So I spent several hours talking to immigration chiefs here in Benghazi on the east side of Libya. The Libyan National Army has a very good grip on the immigration problem, albeit fighting against a huge crisis with limited resources. There is a very, very clear process of giving people proper health checks, the life-saving care that they need, and then working out where it is exactly that they've come from. Their message to the UK is that you are fueling this problem. You are effectively advertising a great new life for people from sub-Saharan Africa. They actually said, you know, what do you think happens when a guy from Sudan comes up through Libya and makes his way all the way to the UK and gets put in a luxurious hotel and provided with everything? And make no mistake, it is a perilous journey. We see it from the end point. We see the Channel crossing as the dangerous bit. But actually where these journeys begin is in the hot desert. Many tens of kilometres have to be covered on foot by these migrants, and as many as 1 in 4 do not make it. That means bodies in the desert. The Libyan authorities are having to recover bodies in
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here right through until 1 o'clock, and indeed tomorrow and Sunday between 10 and 1 to discuss the big issues of the day. The US is locked and loaded and ready to intervene in the Iran protests. We'll talk about that in just a second. Also, Shamima Begum, big debate today about whether she should come back to Britain. Lots of people talking about that, as well as the Troubles Bill, what the government's putting forward in terms of prosecuting soldiers, immunity, all those big issues. And Zoran Mandami as well, who is the mayor of New York. Plenty of people want to talk about him too. We'll get to all of that. We'll talk to you about the big story as well, about the Islamist killer winning a £250,000 legal battle over his human rights. This is an absolute scumbag who murdered 2 people, the 18 and 19-year-old, in a drugs dispute. He was then put in prison. He then took a prison officer hostage and was put in isolation as a result, which to me is a perfectly legitimate, reasonable, straightforward thing for a prison to do. No, it affected his mental health, and now he's getting £7,500 into his hand, and you, the taxpayer, are paying £250,000 to pay the legal fees, of course. We'll talk about Switzerland as well. That was a big breaking story on New Year's Day. Of course, Paul Sims is correspondent at The Sun on the horror inferno that left dozens of people dead. There are all these bits of video coming out. The Italian foreign minister is actually at the scene at the moment, so there's lots to update you on all of that, and we'll take all your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note. Please send them in less than a minute if you would. We'll pay those out before 1 o'clock. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss in the next hour here on Talk. And as I said, I'll be here between 10 and 1 tomorrow, so I hope you can join me for that. And on Sunday with some top guests. We also, next week, Monday to Friday, I will be doing Drive next week. And it's a big week. Of course, it's the first full week of 2026. And Jeremy Kyle is going to be doing the breakfast show permanently. The Jeremy Kyle breakfast show starts at 6 a.m. on Monday morning. You don't want to be anywhere else. You want to listen and watch Jeremy as he takes over the show permanently. Well, let's speak now about what Donald Trump has been saying. He says the US is locked and loaded and ready to intervene in the Iranian protests. There have been at least seven have been killed by the regime protesting the many factors, but including the economic factors. We have inflation at 52%, of course, but many other factors. This brutal regime. Catherine Perez Shakdam is an Iran expert and executive director at We Believe in Israel. We're going to talk as well to Matthew Bryza, who's a former White House official under Bush Jr. and Obama. Catherine, let's start with you. Are we witnessing the end of Iran's Islamic Republic?
I think so. I really do. First of all, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I think it's starting with a bang. if you can call it that. Look, there's something that is very different about this time around. I know that Iranians have taken to the streets in the past, but something is it's not just different. The structure, the way that the regime is actually responding to the protest tells you that they're on the last leg. Yeah. Normally, what happens is that Basij gets into play, arrests are being made, and people turn to get fearful and they stay home. This time around, the RSGC had to call out from outside their borders, and they had to beg people to come in and help them, which tells you that the regime is being dismantled.
On the reformist president as well, he's not involved with the security side of things and the crackdowns necessarily, although he's not a nice person either. He is actually saying that these people should be listened to, that their demands should be listened to in some way. Can we take that seriously, do you think, or
No.
is this just panic?
No, this is a play. This is a play that the regime does every single time. So here's the problem. The West has a propensity to believe Islamofascist and think it's a great idea to negotiate with the devil. I would argue otherwise. If a regime like that of Iran that has created so much pain and misery across the world, they committed crimes against humanity, let's remember that. I'll tell you that they want to come to the table and negotiate. I say go home. Go to jail, leave the country. Let's not do that. Let's instead support the Iranian people and make sure that they have what they want, which is a democracy, which is a say, which is the ability to go down in the streets and dress in the fashion that they wish, which is to be able to practice freely without the fear of reprisals, their religion, their faith. The things that we do enjoy in the UK.
Well, essentially the freedoms we enjoy in the West and enjoy in this country. Matthew, perhaps I can ask you about these comments and indeed post on Truth Social by Donald Trump telling Iran that the US is locked and loaded. He said that the Islamic Republic if they killed further peaceful protesters, the US would come to their rescue. We know, of course, this comes at the background of the 12-day war and the destruction of many of Iran's nuclear facilities. From an American perspective, what do you make of what Donald Trump has said here? He's obviously a famously dovish president who doesn't like getting involved in international and overseas battles.
Yeah, indeed. And Happy New Year to you, Peter. And I was really struck by what Catherine was saying just now. Powerful analysis. But in any case, President Trump, as we all know, wants to get a Nobel Peace Prize during the 12-day Israel-Iran war. It was widely reported that President Trump had resisted or dissuaded Netanyahu from seeking regime change. As you and I, Peter, have discussed before, after the U.S. bombed those nuclear sites at Fordo and Isfahan, etc., President Trump came out and said, "Okay, well now maybe we can talk about peace because we made our point known." Locked and loaded is not diplomatic language. Obviously, it sounds like high school.
Although he's not always known for his diplomatic language, to put it mildly.
That's true. But he's trying to push the regime over the edge, following up on Catherine's analysis. But I was involved with the planning during my White House days of the liberation of Iraq, and it took 6 months to plan that. The bombing of the nuclear facilities in Iran, that took decades of planning. You can't simply send U.S. forces to Iran and then prevent the regime from attacking its own people or retaliating to topple it. It's impractical.
It's interesting, Catherine, that we've seen Ali Larijani, who's Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, claiming, unsurprisingly, Israel and the US stoking the demonstrations. Change the record, Ali. We distinguish the positions of protesting shopkeepers from destructive elements, and Trump should know that America's interference in this internal model equals the disruption of the entire region and the destruction of America's interests. Fighting talk from him as well to what the US president has said, Catherine.
Yes, so look, Iran again has this habit of making everything about someone else except themselves. Every time that someone does anything we think, because thinking is something that is not allowed under the regime, you are being accused of being a Mossad agent. I should know. It's just, look, everything that they do and say is a manipulation. The problem that we have, and this is important because I want to really make this point, is that we continue to believe that this regime is is contained within the borders of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is not true. It's geared towards export. And I've said this many times over. The issue that we have today is that when they're trying to claim that Israel or the EU or the UK or America or any other Western democracy is involved in the protests and trying to fan anger or unrest, what they're trying to say really is to signal to those cells that do exist in our countries, unfortunately, to potentially threaten us. So it's a covert threat of retaliation against us. Why? Because they're going to need to have a coming out party if indeed they fall within the borders of Iran, because they're going to have somewhere, they're going to need to have somewhere to go. This is what worries me today, is that we're completely unprepared. We don't realize that we have invited in very dangerous elements within our societies, and that those people mean business. So I would welcome President Trump to do something and do it fast. And there are many ways, locked and loaded is one thing, but we could make sure that, for example, Iranians have the internet, Elon Musk get involved. There are many things that could be done, that should be done.
What do you make of that, Matthew? What do you think, what sort of support should we offer, and what can we, sitting here in the UK, the viewers and listeners to this programme, most of them, actually do to help the Iranian people who've been through such a hugely terrible time?
Well, if the decision is to try to topple the regime, then I think public statements, public support across our societies, beginning with our national leaders, could really go a long way, in terms of energizing those protesters, giving them courage. There have been several deaths in clashes over the past couple of days, and also, maybe changing the political calculus along the lines of what Catherine was saying. They may decide, the clerical leadership, that they have to flee, that that's their best option. But they're going to, of course, they're going to try to intimidate as much as they can the protesters and get them to back down. So again, if the goal is to try to topple the Iranian regime, then now is the time for clarity among all of the supporters of the Iranian people everywhere.
Catherine, I wonder if we could put a point to you from Jake, who's been in touch a few times today. This is the third message I've read out of his. I'm not going to read out any more, Jake. I'm sorry, just to make it to be fair to everybody who's messaging in. But Jake seems to know his stuff on this. I wonder, he says, didn't Iran declare war on the US just before this all kicked off? I fully believe they can get involved and support the revolution. What do you make of what Jake said there, Catherine?
Well, that is true. An Iranian minister came out, I think it was yesterday or the day prior, saying that he declared war and that Iran was fully engaged in a war against the EU. So Europe was mentioned, not just the UK, but Europe as a whole, Israel, and of course America. I mean, Israel is always at the center of everything that this regime does. But it really tells you, look, we have been declared war to a long time ago. It just became really late to that party, trying to understand that what is happening today in our society and this erosion of a Western institution, has been done courtesy of the Muslim Brotherhood and the ISGC, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and their ilk. We have a problem, is that we need to realize that those people, this Iranian diaspora that left a long time ago, decades ago, fleeing the regimes of the mullah and sought refuge in our beautiful countries, do not want to run away again because we have been fooled enough to allow the regime back in. This is something that we need to address. This issue in Iran, this fall of the regime, is a necessity, I would say an existential threat, on the basis that if we don't do it, they might come here.
Well, indeed. Catherine, I'm going to let you go, but listen, thank you very much. I've also been accused on many occasions of being a Mossad agent. I just think I'd be a rubbish Mossad agent. I just think I'd drop things, my alarm would go off, I'd give my position away, all that kind of stuff. And I keep, people put me on Twitter saying you get 7,000 shekels every time you say something nice about Israel. I mean, if that was the case, I wouldn't be eating a Pizza Express this evening. Anyway, Matthew, just before you go, I wonder if I could ask you about Zoran Mandami, because he has had quite a controversial start, unsurprisingly, in New York. I just wonder what your thoughts were on him.
Well, I watched parts of his inaugural speech yesterday, and he was, he was very compelling in terms of being a charismatic speaker. He was underscoring kind of the main point in American politics now that he brought to the forefront, which is affordability, the fact that everything's too expensive. And this was what destroyed Kamala Harris's campaign, besides herself and her own personality.
Yeah. Yes, that helped too.
That helped, her voice, et cetera. Yeah. But, the Biden administration spent too much time trying to persuade Americans that the economic pain they feel shouldn't be felt. They shouldn't be feeling it because statistics show the economy was better than they seem to think.
There's never a great way. It's like, well, here's a chart that can show you that what you're feeling. You know that those groceries you bought, they're really expensive. They're not actually that expensive because this chart says so.
Exactly. So that was a big part of Mamdani's speech. Also, though, the parts I heard, he was actually really reaching out to all of the cultural and religious communities in New York. So Jewish, Muslim.
He's been criticised, though, certainly on the anti-Semitism front, even so far, even in the first 24 hours or so. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's true. And he in the past has been, so pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel. And it's, a very fine line between anti-Semitism and criticism of Israeli at times like this. I mean, they're two separate things, but at times like this, after October 7th and the slaughter of the Israelis, I mean, leaning in the direction of defending the Palestinians it's really taking a stand, and it should be criticized.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthew, and Happy New Year to you as well. Your house looks lovely, by the way, just where you're sitting at the moment. Just looks. I think I'd just like to read a book in front of that fire this afternoon. It just looks really, really comfy and lovely. So thank you very much. Okay, Matthew, thanks. Now, Matthew Bryza, who's a former White House official. We also heard from Catherine Perez Shaktam there, who's an expert on Iran and an executive director of We Believe in Israel. Matthew in Warrington is on the line about something different, although we have been talking about it this morning. This is front page of the Times newspaper. The Troubles Bill treats military veterans worse than terrorists. These are the lines of Starmer's own advisor, the Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner, David Johnson, a man with a great military career behind him. He says the legislation that is proposed by Labour eats at the very fabric of the armed forces. Matthew, what's your thought on this?
Hello, Happy New Year to you. Great to speak to you again.
You too.
I think it's a very sad state of affairs that our security forces have to do bad things with bad people to keep our communities and society in a safe place. Maybe years ago now, I served in Northern Ireland for 2 years in the 90s, and we were governed by lots of rules and regulations, and everything was logged. Just to keep going after, it's the same with the police, the prison officer who's had that guy's just put a claim in. What message does that send out? And we've got good, honest, hard-working men and women out there protecting everyone, and if they do anything wrong, they're going to get dragged up in the court.
And it's not just people. And it's not just about the past. It's not just about people like you who served our country back in the day and I'm sure did absolutely everything to the letter of the law. It's people now who are, the recruitment is a big, big issue. You've got these SAS guys, senior commanders and that. We've got 9 people who wrote to the Times who were running the army saying this is going to cause many, many problems. Can I just ask you actually, Matthew, as a veteran, as someone who was part of, and can I just say actually, if it weren't for people like you, the 300,000 people who served in uniform in Northern Ireland, there would have been no peace process. I wouldn't have been brought up in as safe a place as possible, and that promise and the great stuff that happened in the peace process wouldn't have happened without the members of the armed services helping us and keeping us safe. There were some of those 300,000 people, not many, but there were some of those people who fell below the standards that you held when you were in Northern Ireland. Should they face justice?
I think they should have received justice at the time, not 30, 40 years later when that ship has sailed. If you do, in my experience of the military, if we stepped out of line, our officers and senior NCOs would put us back in line and we'd go on memoranda orders, and you could go to Colchester prison, you could get kicked out.
That wasn't always the case. No, we know with things like Bloody Sunday, for example, that things went very, very badly wrong.
I know, but that was a long time ago. There's a lot of other things going a lot worse. It was back in this, when I went, my cousin who was in the same regiment as me, when he was in down in Ireland in this late. It crossed McGlen in the late
very, very dangerous part of the world at that stage.
Yeah. They used to fire a couple of shots up the road or into the air as there was bomb bursting out of the patrol base because he knew that they were going to get shot. Yeah. It was a bit of a dog eat dog. It was a nasty place, and you couldn't just wrap people in cotton wool. Yeah,
and that's a very good point actually when it comes to what so many people talk about now. What has rightly been called this sort of pernicious counter-narrative, this thought that what the IRA and other loyalist terrorists did was in any way justified. They say, oh yeah, the British should face justice, but actually no, what we did was justified. And actually what you're saying correctly is that it was basically a war. If it was a war, well, bad things happen and justice often doesn't happen after that. Do you think you know, looking back on your time there, knowing the places you do, Matthew, and again, I want to thank you for what you and your comrades did, that there'll ever be true truth and justice, or will it simply be a matter of generations moving on?
I think it'll be generations moving on. You're a man from the Great Green Isle. You know what it's like over there. I had a massive culture shock living in Warrington, and, you know, I was going out with a Catholic girl at the time, and the priest used to come round on a Sunday, and it was all very merry and jolly. And you go over to Ireland, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? There's Union Jacks everywhere. There's tricolour here. There's people saying Brits out, and, you know, we spent a lot of our time in Londonderry, and, you know, patrolling the Cregan and Bogside, and
very difficult times, very rough areas at those stages, certainly. Matthew, I remember actually I went to university, and my best friend at university, about 6 months in, we were talking about church or something. I can't remember why we were talking about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, I don't really go to church. I occasionally go to mass on a you know, Easter or something like that." And I said, "Hold on a second, are you a Catholic?" He went, yeah. I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And honestly, it was one of the, as you know yourself, it was one of the first things that people work out about you or think about you when you're in Northern Ireland. Even when I was a teenager, even after the Belfast Agreement, still slightly to this day to some degree, whereas you go basically anywhere else, Warrington, you know, when I was at university or whatever, so irrelevant. It's a very strange thing.
Well, you could drive into Belfast, and on all the major roundabouts going into Belfast, cars would be parked, and that's where Protestants and Catholics would meet each other to go to work, and so they weren't identified whether you were a Protestant or a Catholic. It was that bad, and you wouldn't dream of that in Great Britain or England.
Yeah.
I know you might get a little bit in Scotland.
Well, thank goodness those times are basically over, and you know, Northern Ireland's a much better place. And Matthew, thanks for your call. Really interesting to hear. I love hearing from people who not only have an opinion, although, you know, anybody has an opinion, very, very welcome to give me a ring between now and 1 o'clock at 0344 499 1000. But I love hearing people who have experience. You know, Sandy rang us earlier. She's experience of being a pensioner. She knows what it's like financially. She gave us her experience. Matthew there talking about serving in Northern Ireland. Whether you have an opinion, whether you have an experience, or whether you have an opinion formed by your experience, give me a ring. Let me know what you think. And, you know, I've never been to Iran, but I've got opinions on that, of course. 0344 499 1000. Thank you to Graham, who says, "What's there to say that the current bunch of nutters leading Iran won't be replaced by another bunch of nutters?" Well, that's a very good point, Graham. And I think that when so many people talking about Syria, for example, and the new leader there, well, he's a horrendous Islamist, but he was welcomed by so many tree huggers on the left, including Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, the high priests of that ludicrous podcast where they violently agree with one another on absolutely everything. Right then, lots to talk about with Sebastian Selleck. In a second, he's a Labour councillor and commentator. We'll talk about Keir Starmer and how he runs his government, and actually whether Whitehall is weird and whether he can actually get anything done. Stay with us here on Talk.
I have confidence in the Conservatives, and I have confidence in the energy and combativeness of Kemi.
But the public don't seem to be. The public don't seem to agree with you.
Let's see.
Now, Royal soap opera meets the Epstein files.
Prince Andrew's ties to Epstein already represent one of the monarchy's greatest reputational meltdowns.
This 10-page birthday letter you wrote to Jeffrey Epstein makes a pretty cringeworthy reading.
I find them very embarrassing to see.
First convicted, first indicted, you continued a business and personal friendship.
It was not a business
relationship.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I was criticised on Twitter yesterday for wishing people a Happy New Year. I mean, it was literally the 1st of January, but a wonderful way you could welcome the new year is by having £26,000 in your bank account. And what better way to kick off the year with a chance to win some serious cash, £26,000. It's our biggest New Year cash giveaway. It could be yours, 26k for 2026. Here's how to enter. You can, for a chance to win, you text TALK, T-A-L-K, to 83338. That's 8338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or you can call 0343 423 9761. Lines close at midday next Friday, the 9th of January. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. You've got to be over 18, you've got to be a UK resident. This is a network promotion as well. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com/win. So for your chance to win, you can text TALK, T-A-L-K, to 83338. That's 8338. You can do that now. It'll cost you £2.50, and you could be in with a chance of winning £26,000. Good luck with that. I miss when they asked a silly question, when they said, like, who's the Prime Minister? Is it A, Keir Starmer, B, Margaret Thatcher, or C, a kettle? I think we should bring that back. Now you just have to text a word, and the word is TALK, and you can send it to 83338. Right then, speaking of the Prime Minister, he's not a kettle. It is very much indeed Keir Starmer. Interestingly, that his senior aide, until very recently, a man called Paul Ovenden, has written in the Times today that Whitehall is weird, it's hard to get anything done. We've heard this criticism before from Dominic Cummings, we've heard from Michael Gove previously, talking about the blob and so on, and there's actually quite a number of New Year challenges for the Prime Minister. But let's talk about this particular issue first, the stakeholder state, with Sebastian Selak, who is a Labour councillor and commentator. Apologies there. It's not the 1st of April. You are very much a Labour councillor. Sebastian, Happy New Year. You're very welcome to the programme. I presume, as most people in Westminster have, read this article by Paul Ovenden. I just wonder what you make of it.
Yeah, look, you're right to allude to Dominic Cummings as well. I think it's a bit of a realisation, a bit of a learning for Labour when they came into government, that you have this great machinery, the civil service, you have this separate concept of these stakeholders and this stakeholder stake that he refers to, and you have to wield it. And look, it's something you'll have experience of as your time as a special advisor, and it seems to be that the things you want to do can't always be done. If they can,
it was interesting actually when you're right actually. It was interesting what Keir Starmer said. He actually said this just before Christmas to the liaison committee, the sort of super committee of select committees, the select committee of select committees, where he said you pull a lever and nothing happens. And I just think, you're the Prime Minister, surely you can just drive it through.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But you only have the tools that are at your disposal. I mean, I was pleased to see Pat McFadden in his role as Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, as he then was, talking about civil service reform that was kicked off last year. Clearly, something has to change. I don't think it's anybody's individual fault, but it seems like the machinery of government is not working as it is. And I think a lot of Labour people now are seeing what the Tories were complaining about as well. And clearly, you've had two governments, or successive governments, two parties, moaning about the same issue, and it has to be unpicked in order to be able to deliver the change that is really desperately needed.
It's well worth reading the article. It's on page 8 of the Times today. You can get it online, of course, at thetimes.com. And also, actually, yesterday, I wrote an article for the Times for their feature section, in reaction to Dominic Cummings, what he's been saying on a Spectator podcast this week about much the same things. I wonder, Sebastian, if I can ask you about allies of Andy Burnham. They've demanded Starmer nationalise transport, water and energy services. This is Mainstream, which is a Labour pressure group backed by Andy Burnham, urging the Prime Minister to take back control of key utilities and bring them into state ownership. Given the state of our water service, I say the service in the word very lightly, my bill has gone up by 100% in the last 4.5 years, and the fact that many people will say, transport's not much better, and they have nationalised parts of the train network, for example. Will this be something that Keir Starmer will think about seriously? It would be a really sort of administration-defining policy if it went ahead. Maybe it could be an administration-defining policy for Andy Burnham if he gets to be Prime Minister.
It would. Look, I think this is red meat for the Labour membership. Andy Burnham can't nationalise anything at the moment. He's the mayor of Greater Manchester. He's not in government. So it's very easy for him to make these kinds of calls, which will sound very popular. They're music to the ears of many Labour members. The reality, though, is quite different. As you know, it's very expensive to nationalise big industries. It's not something you can do without paying compensation to those who currently have them. You basically have to buy the assets. Now, I think the government was very clever with rail. They let the contracts expire, and then they got themselves out of those big situations where you do have to pay that kind of money. Water, yeah, really interesting one. I don't know if you live in London. Thames Water, big monopoly.
I do, yep.
Yeah, I've seen my bills go up as well, and it's all to pay bondholders and those who are involved financially with Thames Water, which feels really, really unfair.
Totally.
I expect we will see that come to some kind of a head, because I don't know how sustainable it is as an organisation. But in order to simply buy it off the shelf, if you like, I think just would not be that fiscally prudent in this day and age.
Of course, you could go further. What Zara Sultana says, who's from your party, not your party, but your party, who says that we should nationalise the economy. Which is an interesting idea. I'm not sure it's that practical. Sebastian, thank you. Really good to talk to you as always. Sebastian Salek there, Labour councillor and commentator. We'll be talking in just a second, getting an update on what's happening in Switzerland. There are so many different bits of news and facts that are coming out, of course, about what has happened there. That dreadful fire which killed at least 40 people, about 115 plus people injured there at that nightclub in Switzerland in the ski resort. We'll talk to Paul Sims, who's a correspondent at The Sun. He is in Crans, Montana, and we will talk to him very, very shortly. We'll take lots of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes as well, of course, between now and 1 o'clock. You can get those in by using the main number 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I want to talk now and get the latest from Switzerland. At least 40 people have been killed, around 115 injured at that fire in a bar. Well, Paul Sims is a correspondent for The Sun. He is going to speak to us live now from Crans, Montana, the Swiss ski resort. And this dreadful inferno, teenagers burnt and crushed. Paul, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for joining us today. What have you been able to establish about what happened? And indeed, how are the Swiss authorities reacting to this?
Well, so far the death toll has risen to 47. 115 further people are in hospital. 60 of those are in a critical condition. The majority of them have suffered burns. The information that we've got so far is that on New Year's Eve, the bar behind me, you can see is covered by white tents at the moment, was packed with youngsters aged between 16 and 25. They were here for a New Year's Eve party. The bar itself is split on two levels. There's a ground floor, but there's also a basement. And in the basement, a number of the waitresses were essentially held aloft on shoulders of another bartender, and they were holding champagne bottles that had sparklers attached to them. Those sparklers were raised aloft, and it's believed that the sparklers ignited the ceiling of the bar, which is mainly of wood, but there's also insulating foam on the ceiling, and that caused what's called a flashover fire, which spread incredibly quickly within seconds and engulfed the entire bar in the basement and then started to rise upwards into the ground floor. Now, our understanding at the moment, and this will be part of any kind of investigation launched by the police, is that the fire exits weren't open, and they weren't able to be open. So as a result, the majority of the people downstairs surged towards a very narrow staircase which led up to the ground floor in a desperate bid to escape. Once they'd got to the ground floor, they were hurling chairs through the windows in a desperate bid to escape, which allowed the cold air in, which fed the fire, gave it oxygen, and as a result, within a matter of minutes, the entire building, the venue, was up in flames.
It just sounds absolutely terrifying for those people. You talked about insulating foam there as well. I'm just briefly brought back in mind of the Grenfell Tower fire and the cladding that was there, and insulation sometimes can be highly flammable. Obviously, if wood is very dry, it can be highly flammable as well. All those lines of inquiry will be happening, but there's some frustration, certainly when I was watching the press conferences yesterday. I don't know if you were there, Paul, but there seemed to be quite a lot of frustration from some of the Swiss and other journalists actually getting information out of the authorities.
It's very difficult for the authorities. They're in a difficult position. You can imagine that the scene that is inside behind us is one of absolute devastation. There are the charred remains of 47 people who will need to be identified through dental records and through DNA. There are lots of people who are missing, presumed dead. There are lots of people who are injured and currently in hospital, in comas. And there's a huge amount of work for the authorities to do in order to, first of all, identify those people who are dead. And that is going to be a very long and painstaking process. It's going to take quite a lot of time. I can understand that they don't want to announce any details until they've made contact with the family of each victim to inform them first that they've been able to confirm that their loved one is among the dead. So yes, there is a little bit of frustration, but it's one of those things that it's going to take time for this to evolve. And obviously the focus at the moment is on the victims, but it will move, I think, towards a criminal probe.
As you say, there are lots of details still to come out about the people who have been killed in this, and dental records will be used. Is there anything to suggest that there were British victims?
Not at the moment. The Foreign Office remains on standby for information from the Swiss authorities. It's too early to tell at the moment. We'd expect the Foreign Office to release a statement at some point to be able to confirm whether or not there are any Brits involved. It is a very popular tourist destination with the British, but also with the French and the Italians and the Germans. It's a very popular ski resort. At the moment, there's no word confirming from the Foreign Office whether Brits are involved. It's a very fluid situation, and I suspect we'll probably learn more in the coming hours.
And no doubt you will be reporting about it both online and in the paper tomorrow. That's Paul Sims there, correspondent for The Sun, live from Crans-Montana in the Swiss mountains there. Thank you, Paul, for that update. Really dreadful story, and of course there are more details coming out, and we'll bring them to you here on Talk, and as I say, in the paper and at thesun.co.uk. Mike is in Durham and has given me a ring about Shamima Begum. This is one of the big controversies we're talking about today. Should she be returned to the UK, perhaps to face justice here? She does have British nationality. Mike, your thoughts on this? Thanks for the call.
Hello, Peter. Belated Happy New Year. My thoughts are the cost of this exercise, supposedly humanitarian. If we actually cost out bringing her back to this country, accommodating her, lining up the lawyers to charge her with the offence, the trial, and some possible imprisonment, then let's assume we end up with a sum of X £100,000. I would challenge our leaders to go into the streets with the standard charity begging tin and say, we need to raise this money. You are the taxpayers. You're going to pay it. Put some money in here to fund this exercise.
That's a perfectly fair point, Mike, but of course people pay taxes for a lot of things they don't want a lot of the time. I mean, we pay for prison places, for example. We may say that that's a necessary thing. It's not something you necessarily want your money to go towards. I think Trident is a waste of time, but some of my taxes go towards that, for example. I mean, this is public money, yes, but also do we not have other obligations to say, well, actually, we need to, as Simon Diggins would argue, we need to work out how she was radicalised, what happened, how we stop that happening, and bring her to justice in the UK?
I think if she is brought back to this country for trial, there will be a flood of other applicants with equal cases, and it's not going to go down very well with the British public.
Yeah.
Whether or not you think it's a good humanitarian cause, I think it'll backfire badly on the current government, who are already in deep, deep trouble with the electorate.
My opinion is I would be happy never to see her in this country again, but I also understand the nuance of the argument and what Simon's saying, and indeed what you're saying, Mike, and I really appreciate your call. Let's go to Andy in Shropshire, who wants to talk about the state pension. Andy, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hello, Peter.
Hi there.
First of all, have Happy New Year.
And to you too, Andy.
It's not time yet to call on that. Now, you had a caller on earlier called Sandy about pensions.
Yes.
And I think there's a great deal of confusion that's arisen, mainly because of George Osborne in 2016 bringing in a new state pension.
Yes, that's right. We have quite a few people get in touch with us at various points where they say, actually, because of my age, I get a bit less money.
Well, it's not a little bit less money. Because of my age, I'm about £2,800 less than somebody who's on a new state pension.
Okay.
So that's over...
I mean, that's significant. That is significant, yeah.
That is a really significant amount.
Yeah, over £200 a month, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it's not a small amount, so I'd like to correct you on that.
Sure, of course. Happy to be corrected, yeah.
Okay, I don't normally want to correct you because I really like your programme.
Well, you can like me and correct me, Andy. You can do both. Go ahead.
I will do that if necessary. But, so basically, they're talking about the triple lock, and I can fully understand why a lot of younger people get a little bit upset about this. And part of the problem is that it isn't explained fully what the new and the old state pension differences are. So if I could make a suggestion here, that the triple lock is just held at the moment and applied to people like myself and many others of your callers on the old pension, and bring us up level with the new state pension. Yeah,
that's interesting, yeah.
And then after that, if it's really becoming too expensive to run by the government, then means testing could come in, because there are a lot of people that I know who are on very big pensions, and they say, well, we don't really need to have a state pension because of their private
I mean, they also, in fairness, don't need to claim it, but it's a very, very good point, Andy, and I do think... You know, I think things like the winter fuel allowance, for example, should be opt-in rather than opt-out. It should be dead easy to maybe opt out of it and just say, actually, do you know what, I don't need it, or alternatively claim the money and give it to charity, which a number of people do as well. But I would really question, when I get to pension age, which is, you know, rapidly approaching 25 years or whatever it is, I would be really surprised if the state pension exists in the way it does now. And I think anybody who has a private pension, which I do, and many, many people do, working people do now, I'd be really surprised if I think they will say, sorry, you got a private pension, you can live on that.
Right, well, certainly I don't think anybody's come up with the idea that I'm suggesting.
I think your idea is a good one, actually. I think that should be properly thought about. I think it's a really interesting one as well, Andy, and I suppose, you know, it's all about fairness as well. Andy, great call. Thanks. Give me a ring anytime. Appreciate your contribution. That's Andy in Shropshire there. And thank you to this person who says, Peter, the very first question I was asked when I started working at a factory in St Helens was, are you a Catholic or Protestant? That was in 1974. I hope that's never, ever the case now. It should be totally irrelevant. And I mean, I am a Protestant and I am a unionist, but you know, it's been a while since I've been to church. I think it was probably a year and a half ago when I went to a wedding, which was quite a while ago. It also didn't work out. But anyway, lots more to discuss. We'll talk about Shamima Begum. Lots of people want to talk about that. We'll have more of your messages, calls and voice notes. We'll also have a chat with Petri Hoskin, who is here between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock today. So stay tuned for all of that.
I have confidence in the Conservatives, and I have confidence in the energy and combativeness of Kemi.
But the public don't seem to be. The public don't seem to agree with you.
Let's see.
Now, the royal soap opera meets the Epstein files.
Prince Andrew's ties to Epstein already represent one of the monarchy's greatest reputational meltdowns.
This 10-page birthday letter you wrote to Jeffrey Epstein makes a pretty cringeworthy reading.
I find them very embarrassing to see.
First convicted, first indicted, you continued a business and personal friendship.
It was
relationship.
not a business
Not a business relationship.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Some people asking about my movements. I am doing the usual weekend shows tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, 10 till 1. I'm doing Drive next week between 4 and 7, Monday to Friday. I'm not doing the usual weekend shows next weekend, but I would imagine things will return to normal fairly soon after that. We've got Jeremy Kyle, of course, starting the breakfast show. The Jeremy Kyle breakfast show will start on Monday at 6 o'clock. And Julia's back from holiday as well. She'll be here between 10 and 1. James in Devon says, why are we worried about Shamima Begum? For the past years we've been allowing all our ISIS mates in undocumented and unfettered via boats. Let her in too, which is an interesting perspective on that one. We'll actually quite a number of people getting in touch. Let's have a voice note from Anna on this, please.
Good morning, Peter. Anna, sorry, why is this man feeling pity for Shamima Begum? Did she feel pity for the Yazidi women that she watched, tortured and murdered? Did she feel sorry for the Yazidi children that were chained out in the sun? She watched them while they starved. She played football with people's heads. She sewed young men into explosive vests that she knew were going to kill innocent people.
Anna, I'm not sure about the truth of all those allegations. I know some of it absolutely is true, and I think Shamima Begum is not going to sue us for defamation because she doesn't really have a reputation, but very, very interesting perspective on that, and a strong perspective. And there are many, many people who really do care about this and care about the money it would take, the obligation that we perhaps have as a nation. I wonder what Miranda in Cumbria thinks about this. What do you think about Shamima Begum, Miranda? You're very welcome to the programme.
I personally think that she should stay where she is at the moment. However, it looks like Hermer and Starmer probably were involved in trying to bring her back in the first place. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure Richard Hermer represented her. I think I'm right in saying that.
Yes, and then the thing is, if she does come back, as you've seen this Egyptian, is it El Fattah who came back? They obviously knew about him because his posts are just so obvious. Then she should be brought back. That's it, because it's going to happen. Brought back, detained, and then be charged. And with a lot of, even children in this country under the age of 18 can be put in prison under it's basically detained at His Majesty's pleasure, which essentially means that they are perceived as being too dangerous to be ever released into the public domain.
Do you think she reaches that threshold in your estimation, Miranda?
I do, because if she can talk about severed heads and bins, could she have been there when people were being decapitated?
Well, listen, there are lots of people who will talk about what she's been up to, what she saw. It's interesting, we spoke to a documentary maker a couple of days ago, well worth actually going back and looking at that interview, Miranda, or anybody else who's watching actually. He was on, I think on Wednesday we spoke to him, and he was saying, look, her story changes all the time. Sometimes she says she was trafficked, sometimes she doesn't, sometimes she says it was up to her. There are there's a shifting story from Shamima Begum, who unsurprisingly is perhaps not a reliable witness. Just on a point of clarity, Richard Hermer KC, Lord Hermer, who is the Attorney General, he did previously act as a barrister for Shamima Begum's legal team, representing her challenge against the removal of her British citizenship. He is now the Attorney General of this country. Obviously, a barrister's clients are not necessarily all the opinions that he has. But Miranda, I do wonder how likely it is, and we've got the European Court of Human Rights now involved. We've had the successive governments have not had her back to the country now for 7 years since that decision. Do you think it'll be reversed?
I think she'll be brought back. I think Hermer and Starmer are both in the in the European court's pockets. I think they're probably
they would deny that, Miranda. Just keeping us on the right side of the law, they would deny that.
I am sure that when they're out of government, that's where you'll find them working against whichever government is in power in this country. And I wouldn't trust Lord Hermer as far as I could throw him. So his clients speak a lot for what he's about in this country.
Okay, Miranda, thanks very much indeed. Richard Hermer, of course, is welcome to come on this programme anytime he would deny that he is in the pocket of the European Court of Human Rights. Of course, he is the Attorney General of this country. As we know, he previously acted as a barrister for Shamima Begum's illegal team. No suggestion that he believes anything she believes necessarily. He's acted for all sorts of people, including Gerry Adams as well. As a human rights barrister, you do tend to come across some people who have done bad things in their past, or indeed their present in some cases. Thank you to Anthony in Bristol, who says, "Hi Peter, great show. Regarding pensions, not everyone on the new pension gets the full amount as they were contracted out. Also, the old state pension gets SERPs added to their pension. What people need to remember is that pensioners also pay tax on any income above the £12,570 allowance, also after paying for the state pension and contributing to their private pension." Thank you, Anthony in Bristol. I'm not an expert in pensions, not receiving one just yet, in a minute or two, probably. Tish says that Sandy spoke well earlier on. We're all being robbed by the government, who pay for people who don't deserve a penny from us. Nick says, Starmer may not be a kettle, as you say, but he certainly boils my... Yeah, we'll just leave it there. And someone asked me, have you heard of Kermit Roosevelt? I have heard of Kermit Roosevelt. He was the son of Teddy Roosevelt and indeed had many animals, actually, in the White House. If only someone would write a book about that. Right then, back to Shamima Begum. Let's talk to Les in Birmingham. Les, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hello. Yes, thanks for talking to me. Hey, what I wanted to say is people keep advocating that she should be brought back and face trial in the UK for whatever crimes she may or may not have committed. But my argument is that the crimes she may have committed are all circumstantial. There'd be no credible witnesses at all. Most of them are abroad anyway. The video footage that they've got, a good lawyer could argue, you know, that it's all been faked and this, that, and the other. So really, it's not going to be a proper trial, is it? You know, what are her crimes? I mean, it's just.
She almost certainly committed crimes in Syria. In regard to things that she did in this country itself, I'm not an expert on the case, but I would imagine there would be some legal action that you could take. She claims she was radicalised as well. She was 15. This whole issue as well, Les, I'm quite interested in your thought on this, because when people do things as children, you know, some people say, look, she was clearly trafficked and we can't hold her responsible for what she did then. What do you think when people say that?
Well, I believe when she left the UK, she was maybe 15.
Yeah.
But she turned 16 and certainly 18 while she was out there. And I just wonder, was there an opportunity for her to return back to, you know...
well, it's really interesting you mention that, Les, actually.
An adult, you know,
I was chatting to someone about this the other day, actually, who said, look, there are quite a few of these so-called ISIS brides who've come back to the UK, who've been allowed to come back and said, look, this is obviously a massive mistake. They have great risk. They have great what's the word I'm looking for? They regret and you know, say, look, you know, I'm really sorry. And the authorities essentially say, look, come back. Don't do it ever again. Don't encourage anybody to do it. You've seen how horrendous life is under ISIS. You don't want to be a bride there. Come back. But that's happened in apparently quite a number of cases. But it certainly hasn't happened in Shamima Begum's case, which would lead me to believe that there's a heck of a lot more to this case. Although, interestingly, Simon Diggins, military and defence expert speaking earlier, saying that actually it might expose the intelligence services here, it might expose how she was radicalised, and maybe actually the authorities want to keep some of this under wraps.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. My view is I don't think she should be allowed back into the UK. People say she's stateless as well. Well, she's not stateless because IS stands for Islamic State, S-T-A-T-E.
Well, and she also has Bangladeshi. She has Bangladeshi citizenship as well. So, listen, there are lots of points on this, Les. Really appreciate your call. Thank you to you and Happy New Year to you and all our callers. Maybe I'll stop saying that tomorrow. I don't know. I'm on between 10 and 1 tomorrow and Sunday, and on Drive next week as well. Thank you to this texter who says the very fact we're even talking about the possibility of bringing Shamima Begum back to the UK just shows how far we have fallen. This once great nation is a shattered, broken, rotting version that once was the place people fought and died for. Now we give it away, and that had crumbled into oblivion at the hands of woke socialists. It is beyond comprehension in that person's view. Well, listen, thank you very much for that. And Ray has been in touch on Shamima Begum. He has a voice note. You can send these voice notes in, of course, 0344 499 1000. This is what Ray has to say on Shamima Begum.
Hi, Peter. Great show as usual. Ray from Taunton. Just as a matter of interest, the most simple thing that nobody's thinking about, if you put Shamima Begum in court in England, who is going to give evidence for the prosecution? What witnesses have we got to say, I saw her do this, I saw her do that? Basically none, and she would never appear in court in this country. So leave her where she is, please.
I'm not sure that's quite right. I think there are big prosecution elements that could be put forward in all of that, actually. So I'm not sure that's quite right, Ray. There are a lot of people who say bring her back, including Simon Diggins, actually, including Mary in County Down, who sent a message in earlier, said, look, put her on trial here and let's have the justice here in this country. Listen, we'll see what happens. I expect Shamima Begum may well be something that Petri Hoskin is talking about. Petri is here on the other side of the news. Hello.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to keep across that, and we're going to be also keeping across what's happening with that awful fire. There's a press conference at 2 o'clock, so we're going to be looking at that, waiting desperately to hear if there's any British nationals involved in that inferno. I mean, it's just so heartbreaking.
Oh, it's horrendous.
Absolutely horrendous. But the other things we're going to be looking at is newborn babies could be given a digital ID. Now, they're not going to be applying for jobs, as far as I know.
This is the pernicious aspect of this, because we were originally told it's just about jobs. Guess what? But my question is, if you are told, right, you have to have this, have access to services. If you don't have it, if you are here illegally, for example, or on blood spurting out of your arm, is a nurse going to say, I'm terribly sorry, we can't treat you?
Of course not.
You know, it's a nonsense.
It's a nonsense. And also, as far as I know, I'm aware, for the last couple of decades, you've had to provide a passport to get a job anyway, to prove you're a British citizen. All of it is nonsense. None of it makes any sense to me, but we're going to be looking at that. And also, so many more people are totally against the whole idea, because my concern is this mission creep to a social credit style digital ID like they have in China. So I've got lots of information on that. We're going to be talking about that as well.
Sorry, can you say it the proper way, please? Can you say it the proper way? China. China.
Oh, China. Is that with little hands?
Little hands, yeah.
Talking of Trump, we're obviously going to be talking about Iran, and Donald Trump saying they're locked and loaded and ready to go. Now, does that have more to do with Benjamin Netanyahu asking for his support because Iran is apparently rearming, or is that to do really with saving protesters when he put out a video himself of him dumping excrement on his own protesters? So we'll be looking into Iran as well and what's going on there. So we've got an absolutely packed programme, and of course what we want more than anything is calls.
Of course, absolutely.
Lots and lots of calls.
Yeah.
Oh, and the weather.